got a live one.
Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting for Wednesday, November 6, 2013 of the Marquette Township Board. If everyone would please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, sorry, roll call, please.
Trustee Durant,
Here?
Trustee Trescott,
Here.
Trustee Pompo,
Here.
Trustee LaRue,
Here.
Treasurer Johnson,
Here.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Leamata.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard and Superintendent Page. Committee members are John Marks and Dave Wiegand.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. As you are aware, those items on the consent agenda are items that don't typically require immediate action by the board. This evening's has the approval of the prior meeting minutes of October 15th, overtime report of October 2013, correspondence on requiring board action in regards to the Presque Isle Power Plant ash landfill deposit report. We have bills payable in the amount of $267,403.69, as well as the financial reports from September 2013 financial statement, as well as the treasurer's report. Are there any items on the consent agenda that need to be addressed? Clerk Rattari.
I'm going to add the closed session minutes for October 15th. And Trustee Durant did send me the Planning Commission summary, and I'll add that into the committee other reports. And I'll make sure that goes on to the online packet for the residents to view. I did email that out to the board members, so.
Anything else? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the remainder of the agenda. Are there any items that need to be addressed with the agenda?
Motion to approve? Support.
We have motion and support to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. The agenda is approved. Thank you. This is going to bring us up to public comment. Those members of the public wishing to make comment may do so at this time.
Jim, just make sure that mic's on over there. Make sure that it's on.
Is it working?
Is it on?
I think it is, Jim.
I believe it is, but there's not a red light on.
Okay, no, there's not a red light. If it's just up, it's on.
Good evening, board members. Jim Clark, manager, Cornerstone Development Corporation. And I just want to avail myself to items number 10, B, C, and D, if you have questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else?
Dennis, excuse me. Do we need to, since I made the motion to approve the agenda, do we need to add that we're going to be talking about the water department as part of the forum discussion? Does that need to be part of it?
It's Public Works. I don't think it matters.
Doesn't matter?
I mean,
Okay.
If there's no one else, we will close public comment, move to board member comment. Those members of the board wishing to make comment may do so at this time. Ernie?
Just one comment. On the tax bills this year, there'll be an insert. We're moving forward to giving information for availability of paying bills by credit card. So there will be information with an insert on their tax bill coming out. If that's where it looks right now, it looks like we got everything pretty well set. So that's it.
Thanks, Ernie. Anyone else? Clerk Rattari.
Yeah, I'll again apologize to the residents for the poor sound quality of our meeting. If it's not working after this meeting, we're going to go a different direction. So we're trying to remedy this and make sure you get some clear sound on your meetings. I think for me, reviewing it, the video's fine. It's just the sound part of things that we need to clear up. So again, I apologize to the residents for that, and we'll try to remedy that as soon as we can. So.
Thanks, Randy. Anyone else? Pete?
Just want to bring up the Commerce Drive, the new Commerce going over to Rice Street. The lighting, there's no lighting in there, and someone made a complaint the other night about how dark it was. Plus, I almost hit someone when we were walking there. Very bad. And also the intersection again. I didn't get with Randy yet, but Commerce and Moran. Mr. Oliver almost hit somebody on a bike coming and that, 'cause we have to cut those cattails down there. We'll send somebody over and get that cut down if you could, because something, now that's about the fourth, fifth complaint on that intersection. We're not gonna wait till somebody gets killed or hit. But the light on Commerce is very dark, so be careful when you're driving, 'cause driving a little bit fast, if somebody's walking alongside there, and there seem to be more and more people walking there, so be careful, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Anyone else? Seeing none, we will close board member comment. There is no form discussion to begin with. The unfinished business in regards to the township facilities construction update. Manager Gerard?
Actually, we are in the closing stages, and actually have closed out the fire department process, so the Marquette Mall Community Center and the Fire Rescue Center projects are completed. The only thing that's remaining is the retainage on the fire department, and that'll be after the final punch list and everything is signed off and all of the certifications are received. I did receive today from Mr. Hall manual for all of the operating systems. I'll be passing that along to Chief Sims tomorrow morning to get that to him. We have begun the process of renovation on the public works facility, conversion of the former fire department to public works use, and Mr. Clark will be speaking to that here in just a few minutes. The financing of that project is being done separately because it isn't enterprise funds that are involved there as opposed to the general funds that we were operating the first two phases of the project, and that is being reviewed by the River Valley Bank Board this month at their meeting for final approval, and we'll be drawing from that as well. Beyond that, any questions board members may have?
Pete?
On Public Works, I continue, big pond up by the fire hall, Public Works, is that gonna stay there?
There are actually two, and yes, there will be one that runs along the north border of our property, and there will be another towards the back, and it is so we contain all of the on-site runoff.
The big round retention, that can stay in front there? Yeah, right in front on the north side of the building, it's a big round retention pond.
Well, I think that's just temporary.
Outside.
The intention will be at the back of the building and along the north side of the building, be a long,
That's
long
there,
narrow on
but
the
there's
north
another
side.
round.
Right.
I just haven't got,
I believe
oh,
that's
yeah, I'm
temporary.
talking about.
Jim can speak to that, but I believe that's a temporary concept. You can't create
It
that
is,
problem.
because, excuse me. Because of the large amount of rainfall we've had in the last month or so, we basically have to have a temporary retainage area, and we need to kind of divert that water over that's running off so we can get the footings in and pour it. So it's more of a stormwater diversion and control that's temporary. The final one will be, as Randy said, along the north border that parallels the edge of the property, and then there'll be one in the, it would be the southeast corner. Yeah, of the back of the building that will handle the runoff coming off the roof and the back part here.
Just other board member comments, or any comments on the township facilities construction update? We'll move on to new business. Agenda item number 10A, consider the budget amendment number 2013-13. Clerk Rattari?
Okay, present to the board the budget amendment 2013-13, and like all the budget amendments, they'll be in the minutes. And the highlight of that is authorization is requested to increase revenue and expenditures in the fire fund to accommodate the final progress building. And authorization is also requested to transfer funds from retained earnings in the wastewater and water funds for the first progress building for the Public Works building. Each fund will transfer $46,200. And I move that.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Are there any questions? Lynn?
I talked to Randy, Clerk Rattari, about what account that would come out of. I haven't heard back from Lotus yet. Did you happen to get an answer? Or?
It's a retained earnings. It's an accounting question, and I will have her address that for you.
I can check with her. I just wasn't
Yeah.
sure if you had gotten to her.
Is the question the account number that would be coming out of?
Yeah, because we had discussion before about all the retained earnings, and accounts, and I just wondered if it was a particular one, or, because he's got, Supervisor Page has got different categories for, one of them's building and garage, and
Yeah, this
earmarked.
would come from and Kirk is here, he can certainly respond to it, but I would expect that this would come out of the contingencies in both of those accounts. This is a temporary, this is gonna be replaced.
Oh, okay.
This is gonna be replaced by the financing from River Valley Bank. This is
Okay.
just, the first site preparation and that, while they're processing the paperwork, we're covering it from that to be reimbursed. So it'll be
Okay.
going right back in there.
Thank you.
Are you talking about the $46,000 one? Yeah.
Yes, from each water and
From each
wastewater.
Anything else? If not, we have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment number 2013-13. Secretary?
Secretary is yes. Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Durant?
Yes.
Trustee Pompo?
Yes.
Trustee Trescott?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Lumata?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is 10B, consider progress billing number 11 for the fire station. Jim is available to answer any questions that we may have as we work through these next three agenda items. For the first one, you do have a transbill in your package on progress billing number 11, the final and retention, dated October 31st, to Randy from Mr. Clark. Manager Gerard?
As I mentioned, this is the final billing and the retention that we hold back pending the final closure of all of the documentation for the Fire and Rescue Center. We've already done this for the Township Hall, so this would be the final charge against the fire department. We are, however, still holding some of the funds back with regard to the exterior masonry. There are still some repairs that need to be done on the exterior masonry of the fire department. So that is still being held and will be held until that is satisfactorily completed. So we are recommending that this be approved. It has been submitted for reimbursement to River Valley Bank. I suspect we should have that within a day or two to reimburse this back.
Thanks. Any questions?
When you're talking about holding back some, I'm looking at the documentation here, that $147,000 will be 100% payment now. Where are we holding back any dollars?
We
Jim?
have a $10,000 holdback on the guarantee for that block work. And Jim, do you want to address this?
Yeah, thank you, board members. I'm trying to look at the specific page, but,
I'm looking at page 3 on the progress payment 11.
what I need you to look at is actually the cover letter on the attachments from Hall Contracting. This would be right after the spreadsheet that would be the fourth page of the attachment of the communication. It's a letter dated,
To Cornerstone from Hall Contracting dated
Correct.
October 29th. Final pay request summary.
correct. And if you look at the items as you go down there, shows you the original contract, the design development revisions, the total adjusted contract, the total paid to date. Then underneath that shows the balance due with the invoice of 2012-13-11, which is 34,000, and then invoice number 12 for 5,900, and then there's a total of 43, less the retainage. And then it shows the statement of retainage is $111,982.81. If you see the masonry withhold, 10,000.
That's it.
That 10,000 is being held at this time for quality assurance purposes on the final masonry work. So, yes, it is being paid, but is being withheld by Hall Contracting and us. So it is being paid by the township, but the final bill from us to the subcontractor is not being paid. Okay, so there are assurances that work will be, that's just a guarantee or an assurance that work will be done to satisfaction of the fire chief and the Hall Contracting prior to that being distributed.
One of the reasons for the holdback, and we discussed it earlier today, Brownlee has some concerns about the matching of the mortar and some of the repairs that were done. We won't be able to be positive that was to his satisfaction until maybe next year. so because of that.
Curing temperatures.
Yeah,
is
curing
primary-
temperatures.
Primary concern is, now that we're in cooler temperatures, we're concerned that it might not match once it gets in, it needs higher temperatures for the grout to cure 100%. And
Yeah.
there's also a holdback for, there was some mechanical, what would I call it, breakdown on one of the lift machines that he was using when he was doing repairs on the masonry, and it leaked some oil into the blacktop, and the consulting engineer recommended we hold this money back to make sure that that doesn't damage the blacktop, and waiting to get through a full year winter, you know, with the colder temperatures and freeze and thaw, to make sure that that doesn't come apart or fail, would be the best way to say it.
The long and the short of it is, we're satisfying our obligation, they're forcing their subcontractor to satisfy their obligation to them. So they're withholding the money from the subcontractor. We've paid our bill.
But do we have assurance, looking from a strictly a business standpoint now, when you pay the total amount, they say they have a responsibility to do that, but we've already paid all our dollars toward it. Do we have anything in writing saying this is going to happen?
We have a
Yes.
warranty, we do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's under the warranty, and also, that money is being held by us if he doesn't complete it to both the township and the subcontractor's, requirements or preferences. We would hire, the money would be available to hire an alternative contractor to make sure the work is done properly.
So that was the only question. I looked at 147, I looked at 142, and
Yep.
if we pay 147, we're paying it completely, and we got some things retained here. And yet, we have no control over it, because it's gone out of the township.
Right, basically, the buildings are completed, so they've completed their contract with us. There's a question about, as Supervisor Lehman mentioned, there's a question about the matching of some of the mortar that's on the replaced sections that were done. They're withholding from their subcontractor final payment pending that decision being made, and if it's not satisfactory, they will use that money to acquire another contractor to make it to our satisfaction within the warranty period.
And there's quite a bit of communication documenting all of this. In fact, the township attorney has been involved and consulted on this matter as well.
That's fine. I just want to make sure we are covered. That was
Yeah.
number one, to do so.
Anything else? Seeing none. You need a motion to just move forward, Randy, on the progress billing?
It's just an approval, of the building for payment.
All right. Would somebody care to make that?
I'll make a motion, we pay, payment number 11 for 147,789.66 for the fire station.
Can we indicate the final payment? Would that be correct?
Yes, it's actually the final payment and retention.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I just need to point out, we are going to do a reconciliation between Cornerstone and the subcontractors and township's books, and we will be, so we can provide that to our accountant, and then we will also provide that to Lois Stonehouse, so she can balance her accounts as well.
Okay.
If there's no other discussion, motion is to pay the final contract, including retention. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is 10C, consider progress billing number 12. This has to do with moving forward on the Public Works facility. Manager Gerard.
That's correct, Supervisor Lehman, and this is basically your first billing for this project, and it's basically for the design and the engineering phases of the project that have been completed at this point. You will start to see progress billings coming as we get into the completion of the site development and into the construction of the actual building. So this charge is spread 50-50 to water, wastewater, in essence, and that's what the question we discussed earlier. This recommendation is coming forward to you with a recommendation for payment. If you have any questions of Mr. Clark, he's here.
Any questions from the board in regards to this progress payment? Ernie?
I have just one. I looked at it says progress billing number 12. Being that this is a total new project, I would like to see it as project billing 1 rather than 12. I don't know whether...
Yeah, we did have discussion about that. Internally, we're calling it number 1 for the for the Public Works facility, but it's phase 3 of the 3-phase project, so from their standpoint, they're continuing with the billing process on for the 3rd phase.
Okay.
It's
So-
an amendment to the original contract, so that's why we're not writing a new contract, it's just we're adding the 3rd building to the contract. So
It
that's-
just looks strange when you get 2 done and all of a sudden another one, you're still progress moving down line, progress billing.
From our standpoint internally, when we're doing our draws, we'll be doing draw number 1 for this project. The
Okay.
last project ended at draw number 7, but from their standpoint, under the single contract, it's phase 3, so their progress billings will continue in cycle.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we would entertain a motion for approval of payment of progress billing number 12 or 1, depending on
Who you're
on
talking
which
to.
side of the
Which
table you
general
sit
ledger
on,
you're looking at.
in the amount of $92,400 for the Public Works building.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
This will be coming out of Public Works Fund, or we'll be drawing?
It'll come initially to pay out of Public Works water and wastewater equally, and then it'll be reimbursed with our first draw from the bank. Now, if it will make it easier for the board, what we can do on these progress payments when they come to you, this could be identified as number 12 PW for Public Works, and then we can do 13 PW, so you'll have a break point, so you'll know.
That would be fine.
I can do that as well.
Okay.
There's no other discussion. A motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. The next item on your agenda is 10D. Consider the new Public Works facility surveying and materials testing. Manager Gerard.
This is a separate contract that we would be contracting directly, as we did with the first 2 buildings. We contracted directly with the surveyors and with the engineers. So this would be covered under the total project, would be part of it, but this would not come through Cornerstone necessarily. So we are recommending the award to Coleman Engineering. I believe it is.
Coleman Engineering would be the materials testing and the surveying would
North
be done
Country
by North
Engineering.
Country Engineering.
Correct.
And that was basically done to reduce costs to the township. North Country was already involved and very familiar with the site and benchmarks in the area. And Coleman came in as a little bidder, and they're very well qualified. In fact, Coleman does a lot of the work for Mr. Page already.
So
But the work is being direct between the township and the engineering, so there's no conflict of interest. They're not working for the contractor or the subcontractor.
they're working
And
for
that's a
us.
quality assurance provision to make sure that our workmanship is being done at a level that satisfies all of the engineering and specifications within the contract.
So the recommendation would be to approve the awards as recommended and authorize signing of the contract.
Any questions from the board?
What is the amount? Because I'm trying to go through.
$7,900.
Correct. There's two parts to it.
It's North Country, look at the first transmittal, Ernie, from Hall Contracting.
Yeah.
North Country Engineering, $3,250.
Yeah.
Coleman Engineering, for the materials testing, $4,650.
Those would be the 2 awards, and then authorizing the contract to be signed.
Lynn, you have a question?
Yeah, I don't understand this billing either. I've got lots of things circled. I'm just trying to get one number based on Coleman and GEI and North Country. I just can't. I've got a total of all of them of $26,285,
No, we're only looking for,
but they're all kind of intermingled. The amount's quite the same as this. I couldn't come up with those numbers.
we're only looking, if you look at the transmittal that came from Hall Contracting dated October 31st to Manager Gerard, and it's highlighting that, the proposals that came in regards to the surveying and material testing for the Marquette DPW project, and it's what they're asking the recommendation be is that the services be awarded as follows: surveying, North Country Engineering for $3,250, material testing, Coleman Engineering, $4,650. The other information included on that transmittal is just showing you what the bids came in at. So the only thing we're asking for here is to move forward with the $7,900 and award the surveying bids to North Country Engineering and the material testing bid to Coleman Engineering.
Okay, so the Coleman Engineering packet, little proposal here with the letter that's following here. It looks like 3 of those numbers make up the 4650 then.
Correct.
And then the first page of 7150 has nothing to do with it.
No, that was their surveying bid, and we're proposing the surveying going to North Country Engineering. We submitted bids for surveying and for material testing, 2 separate activities.
Okay, so the 7150 from Coleman is not accepted.
No, it is not. What's being recommended is North Country Engineering as the low bid for surveying at $3,250, and for Coleman Engineering to be awarded the low bid of $4,650 for the materials testing. That's what's before you.
All right.
And authorization to sign those 2 contracts.
So this
I think I was
is-
following the same with Lynn, trying to go through here and trying to pick out the
That's-
figures. Every time I turn around, there's another little figure, and I try to
Yeah.
put them all
The
together
other-
in that.
The other information was included so that the board members would be able to see that it was out on bids, and that we were recommending that we accept the low bids for both surveying and material testing.
Okay, that makes more sense. I had a couple questions about the contracts themselves. Do we want to wait on that? Because we're looking at this particular part of it.
No, where the motion would be to approve the low bidder and to authorize either Clerk Rattari or whoever to execute the contracts
For that work.
for that work.
I just would like to point out that we did have the same structure with Public Works, the Township Hall building and the Fire Hall building, and
Right.
that was awarded to GEI. So what we did, we got a little more proactive because we had the time to do that, to send this out and get more competitive bids so we could act and advise the township, I guess, do this in a fashion that would reduce your costs and still get services that you need.
There's nothing in here that says anything about a completion date that I could find? Is that not, is it just, does it matter?
Well, with testing, it's based on when they're notified. With the materials testing, whenever we pour concrete, they are notified the day before. And when they come to pour concrete, they pour test cylinders. And then those test cylinders are taken to do a 7-day test and then another 28-day test. And then those results are forwarded direct to the township, and they are copied to us too, to make sure that if anything failed, that we would need to replace it. But the timing is basically when we notify them.
Okay. So it's nothing that we're requiring there?
Correct.
Okay.
No, and it's part of the progress, basically, as Jim mentioned, and you'll recall that was the same process. We repeatedly would get those over the course of the progress as the concrete was curing and the testing was done. Strength testing primarily is what it is.
Make sure
As
the
it cures.
concrete is strong enough and meets the specification. The minimum specification I believe we're looking at on this contract is 3,000 PSI for the concrete.
Minimal.
Minimum.
There was a statement also in the Coleman contract that says that they can give us 14 days written notice and change their prices. Is that something we need to worry about?
That's
It's kind of a
pretty
small
normal
amount.
for testing companies, and it's primarily focused on variable costs such as fuel. They normally just don't send you we're gonna double the prices. They send you an advance notice that says, due to fuel increases, we're gonna need to adjust the price accordingly. It's not like they can just randomly do that.
Well, it says it's typically done annually at the beginning of the calendar year, so I didn't know if we were agreeing to something and they were just gonna, first of the year, raise the prices.
Yeah, this is gonna be short-term process. We anticipate being in the building by February, March.
Most of this work will be done prior to December
Okay.
31st. I would say 95% of it.
Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah,
Other questions?
These are their standard contracts, and sometimes they have, you know, bigger construction projects that might go on for a year and a half, 2 years. That's when those
Yes.
become effective. This is gonna be relatively short term. We're talking 60 to 90 days.
Okay, makes sense.
There's no other questions. Please entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Indicate who's gonna pay, or who's gonna sign.
Clerk?
Have the clerk, authorize the clerk to execute the agreements.
So I will write this motion up as we will approve North Country Engineering for $3,250 for the surveying, and materials testing Coleman Engineering for $46.50, and authorize the clerk to sign and execute. Correct, Dan?
Mhm.
And Pete?
Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? This motion passes. Thank you,
board
Jim.
members.
Next item on your agenda is 10E, consider the electronic survey for video services to be completed by November 27th online at michigan.gov. Manager Gerard,
Actually, I believe this is Superintendent Page. I do not have it in my packet.
I don't either.
Kirk? Did you want to speak to this item, the electronic survey, video services?
I'm sorry, I'm not on that end. Where are we?
10E.
10E.
I'm presuming this is
It's a
yours.
transmittal from the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. Has,
Sure.
Oh,
I'm
I do have
coming
it.
on
This is
but,
it.
it has to
it
do,
has to do with the video too.
right, Randy, it has to do
Oh,
with,
sorry, I do have it. It was out of sequence.
it was,
Oh, this has to do with our franchise.
right.
I'm
It's
sorry.
just a video franchise
Yeah,
thing, and
That's all it is.
it's sent to franchise entities, municipalities in the state of Michigan, and then it includes some information on there, so I don't know what action you needed us to
This
take.
actually should have been under the consent agenda. It's simply information.
It's informational only.
Because it basically has to do with if you have
Yeah.
complaints, whether you're a municipality or an individual, there's information provided that would allow you to,
File a complaint.
right.
It's a notice.
So
No
no
action.
actions required.
No action required of the board.
Treasurer Johnson?
Could we put a comment on our website as to if people have concerns, where they can contact in the state,
Sure.
rather than come to us?
Well, actually, it is directly to the state, so
Yeah.
yes, we can send that out with the billing.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to 10F, Manager's Report.
I really didn't have anything to add on the manager's report other than just a comment. Earlier under the consent agenda, you did have the overtime report. It was this last overtime report was fairly sizable. We were experiencing, Superintendent Page and I have been discussing this and we're working on it. We've been experiencing some issues with our telemetry in terms of the automatic pages and the alarms at our pumping stations. Resulted in a significant spike in increase over the last 2 or 3 pay periods. We're trying to work through that. I guess the long and the short of it is when the way the alarm system works, and Superintendent Page can chime in on this or answer any questions, but when either one of our pumping stations, either water or wastewater pumping stations, sets off an alarm, that alarm does not come to us. That alarm is transmitted downstate, who then dispatches our worker. They have no idea what it is they're going to, so in essence what happens is they go to the site, check to make sure the pumps are functioning or not functioning, and if they are functioning, they reset the alarm. We've been having repeated trips, and we're not sure what's causing that, but that has caused the spike in the overtime, because as you may recall, our labor contract provides a minimum of 2 hours of overtime for each call-out, so we're trying to figure out why that's happening, working with the folks that are involved in that transmittal process to try and get that down, but it has bitten us in the last couple of pay periods. Kurt, do I make any comments?
Can you come up?
Yeah, I can expand on that a little bit.
basically, as Randy mentioned, we have monitoring, remote monitoring of our sewer associations. The communication process is through cell phones. And basically it'll send out a message by email, phone, text to a number of different people. Specifying what alarm conditions is. One of the alarm conditions is lost communications. So basically it goes out just like a computer or a modem. Typically we'll get a lot of communication failures, but it returns within seconds normally. So first of all, we started getting an increase in those communication failures, and they were coming back pretty frequently, or instantaneously pretty much. So that's an alarm, but okay, it's just saying, okay, you had a problem, it's fixed already. Then we started getting delays in the return of the communications, and it started impacting more and more stations. We've got 5 substations. Ultimately, we ended up losing 4 out of the 5 totally. So, in other words, the communications were lost. They did not return at all. And what that means is, even we can log online to view our station. So you log online and there's no data because there's no communication. So for that reason, first of all, there's a long troubleshooting process. Then we have to contact our service provider, and they basically couldn't figure it out either. So their ultimate solution was to replace all the modems, which they did. But again, that took time. So in that interim, when we had lost 4 out of 5 stations, what happened was since we had absolutely no idea what was happening. You know, the pump could be off, we could have sewage flowing down the street, we don't know. So we had to physically visit every station, basically on the weekends, 3 times a day. So like early in the morning, midday, and then later. And each one of those was like a 2-hour. And we alternated, I wasn't the same person. It was mainly the person on call, but, people had to get sleep, sometimes. So there was multiple people, multiple times. So.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working, except we still have one that's already with the new modem. It's still having multiple communication failures. And they are returning, but again, this is how it started the last time. So it's like a virus almost, that spreads. So it seems to be okay right now, but we're not sure.
And basically what it amounts to is, we don't have afternoon or night shift on, like the city of Marquette and some others do, where they've got staff shifts. So everything we're doing is by remote monitoring. And the key here is modem. Those of you that have your home computers know that your modems fail periodically, and that's what was happening, is the modems that were transmitting the data were failing, so there was no data being transmitted, and they took that automatically as a failure of the pump. Generated the call.
Yes,
So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and we're going to put a report together for you for the next meeting on what our status is with getting that fixed, so we don't continue to get these overtime charges.
Well, like I said, as of right now, it is.
It's functioning.
As far as we know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the kind of problem that we can't really address with like staffing levels.
Yeah.
We can't say, what we have to do is, hire another crew, and we have to be there like 24/7. So obviously, the whole purpose of doing this in the first place was to reduce, manpower.
Right, the overall
But
cost.
it's just like any other electronic device. The phone system to use all of it. It's still kind of hit and miss. Your microphones are another example.
Same kind of thing.
All it is the same stuff.
But I just wanted you to be aware of it, that it's something that we are trying to get a handle on and to control, but it's been something that's kind of been out of our control because it's electronic in nature. So just wanted to bring that to your attention when you take a look at that you will be getting a report back on the status of it. It was a relatively lengthy legislative report in my manager's report this time. I simply wanted you to have some of the background of these things because these are the continuing types of conditions that we're seeing in this state that have a negative financial impact on us. The personal property tax, for instance, the first one that was on there, we just received notice today that the governor has signed one of the bills into effect, and that had an immediate $9,348 reduction in our revenue for 2013. So these are going to continue. This is the pattern that we're seeing coming out of the state, that there are more and more and more of these kinds of bills being passed that are ostensibly designed to benefit business, but it's coming at the expense of local governments, and it is reducing our revenue stream. It's making it more and more difficult for us to continue providing the services that we're providing. So I gave you the long versions because it has the sponsors of the bills in it, and if you want to pass this information on to your constituents, they should start contacting some of these folks and letting them know that they're having a negative impact on their local government's ability to function. So that's why I included it.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Any other questions for Randy in regards to the manager's report? Seeing none, I ask that question every time, yet Randy, I know that there's a few board members who do not like your manager's report and want something different. I generally always ask any other information at the board table, and nobody ever asked any other information, but I saw it in your reviews. There was some discussion to it. I did get an email again this week, and before we move off your manager's report, I would like to open it up for some board discussion.
Sure.
On what those of you who feel that it could be better served by having additional information in there, what it is that you'd like to see from Manager Gerard, and he could start to incorporate that in future managers' reports. So I would open it up for board discussion.
I would just like to see what's going on in the township, or some of our projects, upgrades, and, I wouldn't have known about the warehouse up there if I didn't go up there. Just a small one, hey, we're on track, we're doing this, we're doing that. Instead of at the new Public Works.
Oh.
I learn more by going to a restaurant and you're going to say, hey, what about this, man? Huh?
So specifically, what would you like him to include?
Just something that's going on, that ongoing projects, a little update, what's going on in our township, where we stand on them.
Ongoing projects, including retail new development.
Stuff like that, yes. Yeah.
Well, much of that stuff is
You can't say
confidential,
that
and we
anyways.
can't bring it up
Right.
publicly. That's one of the problems is, we have a commitment that we make to developers that we will not disclose publicly any information
that's
until
good.
they're ready to disclose it.
Right.
That includes talking about some of the things that you're talking about at board meetings. I mean, we just can't do that.
But some of it, Randy, you can just provide what you can provide, like the theater. How's that going? Have you heard anything about their construction project? I think, if you can include those, maybe that would be helpful for some board members, just to hear more information on those types of things, whether it be AutoZone or the theater project, or, have you had any communication, or where's that at, or are we still progressing?
Quite frankly, that's not on my desk. That's on
I
Jason's desk. So I can get staff reports from folks, but that's Planning Commission is dealing with all of that development. And zoning,
We haven't met, so I don't have anything
Yeah.
either. We
Maybe a
didn't meet
small-
last
well,
time.
I'll put together a couple of different formats, and let's take a look at them and see what there is. I mean, most of the things that come up that I think might be of interest to board members, we send out immediately by email. So, rather than load up your agenda with 50, 60 items. But I'll put it in whatever format you'd like to see it.
Maybe a small comment about the event committee, you got that Christmas, so
No,
it
but-
tells everyone in the board, except for the people who went to the meeting, what's coming up, and then we can be talking about it. Someone asks, hey, make sure you bring your kid up, something like that.
Sure.
Anyone else?
I think
Ready?
just following up on pizza, just a short synopsis of what has happened from the last meeting to this meeting, something that is involved in the confidentiality, that things that have come up that may have been of interest to us, or that we don't really know about until we get in here and talk to somebody. That doesn't have to be much, just a bullet type thing, and that too. That's all you really need in that too, and then the other thing I would look for is things that you see happening between this meeting and the next meeting that the township will be working on or different things. Here again, just bullet type things, nothing elaborate, because if I want to find out, then I'll contact you, just bang, bang, just to, something like this. You don't have to go into a lot of depth in anything, as far as I'm concerned in that.
Okay, anything specific, or any, like, for an example? Just that I want to make sure Randy understands what you're asking for.
I think, like Pete said, just the status of the theater, and that if you know something about it, or tell us to, we better contact the planning commission because things are happening there or that, or the road commission is planning to do something within the township or that, or MDOT is that. Things like this here that would come up across your desk that we don't normally ever hear about. But yet, eventually, it comes up in that. And leave it really at your discretion. Just pull it out, just the happenings in that.
I'm still amazed at how many people watch this. They tell you about it. And maybe they'll know more about the events and what's happening in theaters, and might help it. Because there are a lot of things happening out here. You know, and we want to tell people what's happening in their community. So.
And it could be, maybe even going back to staff, just some bullet items on that to get it out to the people. Because be honest with you, when I go to the Township Business Association and I get staff there and they start talking about some things that are happening in the township, I just sit back there, okay, now I find out more on that too. So things like this here, because it's not confidential, but there are things that they're working on. And it's open to the public at that point in time. So, no.
Sure.
Anything else? No? I wrote a bunch of notes down. We went, Randy, you and I can talk about it for the next one.
Maybe a different format.
All right, thank
Okay.
you. If there's nothing else for Randy, we'll close the manager's report, move to public comment. If those members of the public wish to make comment, we do so at this time.
Thank you, board members. I just, because of your managerial discussion, I just brought up something that I forgot to mention when we talked about the new public works building. I would like to maybe have the ability for the board to do a walkthrough like we did on the last two buildings. And hopefully we can schedule that on a non-work day, Saturday morning is what we did on the other two buildings. And we can do that, you know, around your, what schedule works for you. I just wanted to make that available to you. That site will be a little more challenging to get in and out because we are remodeling and it's part of an existing building and then erecting a new building. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. And then the next item I just want to mention briefly is one of the successes of this township over the last 20 to 30 years has been the successful expansion of your infrastructure system, primarily water and sewer that you provide to the township and township businesses. I believe 67%, I believe, of your water and sewer usage is actually commercial usage. And I think it's real critical that we, when you're working on your budget work session, which is your next item for public works, and I believe you would set water and sewer rates during that discussion, that you factor on long-term planning in your discussion. The continued expansion of the infrastructure is paramount to the continued expansion of your tax base. If the infrastructure isn't there and it's not properly maintained, I don't think you'll see this kind of commercial expansion that you've experienced in the last 20 to 30 years. So please factor that in your discussions, that long-term capital planning is essential to keep this a viable township and a viable infrastructure system for businesses to expand. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else? Seeing none, we will close public comment. We'll move into agenda item number 12, forum discussions, a continued budget work session. We're still on public works. I would I'll defer to the board. When we left off last time, I don't think we had made a great deal of progress moving, and I think a lot of the discussion continues to revolve back to rates, what proposed rates and fee increases that's kind of how we ended our discussion last time. I know that there was much consideration given to the retained earnings and how that's set up, and I know, Lynn, you were looking for, to see if there'd been a motion passed prior to, I don't know if you'd like to just bring us up to date on where you're at in your discussion or discovery.
So far, I don't really have any more information. I went back to the minutes from 2010 forward, because I'm guessing it's in the last 3 years that we talked about it. And then I've been kind of talking to Randy Rattari, and I was going to email Lois, and I realized that my email didn't go through. But my question was, next, looking for when on the financials the earmarked items showed up on the balance sheet. And then I was going to go back to the minutes. All I looked for was motions in those 3 years of minutes, and I didn't see anything. I'm pretty sure our discussion was at a budget meeting rather than at a regular meeting, so there wouldn't have been a motion. But I was just trying to pin it down, hoping that I could then go back to the minutes and see if there was some discussion about it when we finally came out. It took me, I don't know, an hour, hour and a half to go through all those minutes, just quickly looking for motions. So I didn't put a lot of time reading that stuff. I can go back, but the thing I remember was I'm trying to think how, I don't remember what the discussion was. And I know Trustee Pompo said the same thing. Treasurer Johnson remembered. Trustee Truscott remembered. I'm not sure if Pete did or, but basically it was that I was under the assumption that the earmarked items we had in water and wastewater were just that if money was to be transferred or used for different purposes from those specific items, that it would come to the board and we would decide whether it would come out of that account. So in other words, if we had an earmark for the garage, which we do, and I don't remember off the top of my head, it was 50,000 or something like that, 52. If we decided that we were not gonna hold, we were gonna hold rates, water rates the way they were, and we were gonna take $10,000 from whatever of his accounts to balance the budget and not raise rates, that we would decide that, which account it came out of. Maybe we decided we would take it out of the garage account. That was the contention I made the last time we talked about this. And just a few of the board members remembered it happening that way. Obviously, like I said, there wasn't a motion, so it wasn't something that is law, basically. It was a discussion item.
I can probably come up with that date for you. It was in a work session. In fact, it was ongoing over several sessions. If you'll recall what you were asking for when we had discussed it, we, as a board, didn't take that action to make a motion to do that because the conversation kept going back to it would hamstring the department if these funds were locked up, and that when we began to break it out as you had requested into those earmarked funds, the idea was that it was going to be a planning tool. And when Kirk and Lois first began to work on it, they put it together in one variation and brought it forward, and it was not deemed acceptable, and we kept having them go back and try it again, so that ultimately you would be able to see a dollar amount tied to the earmarked funds as well as the number of years, and that's what we got from them finally as a planning set those funds up separately. The entire thing is earmarked basically in retained earnings. Those funds can only be used for enterprise funds, as you're well aware. And, but those separate funds, I mean, you don't set up separate funds, and in fact, it would be outside the guidelines for generally accepted governmental accounting principles to do so.
Unless we had a line item budget, maybe?
It
Or it still wouldn't?
wouldn't matter. I mean, you basically, you have a line item budget right now. When you're looking at this, you've got a line item budget. But when you look at taking something like those funds and saying we're gonna lock them in here, and the board's gonna determine whether we'll put money towards, you know, meter improvements or the well monitor pipe installation, and we'll decide where that money's gonna go or come from. My comments would be, number one, this board has no expertise in that area and shouldn't be making those kind of decisions. We don't know, that's up to Superintendent Page and the experts who run our water and wastewater systems to make those kind of decisions. Number two, you don't hamstring yourself so much that you would have those things where you can't shift funds out of there when we need to do budget amendments like we did this evening. It would become unworkable. We wouldn't be able to operate. And again, I know Lois had provided some information. I don't know, did that go out? Did anyone, did that just go to you, Clerk Rattari and Manager Gerard? But it has to do with accounting standards and principles and why you're not gonna do that, especially in a governmental operation where you're gonna have that money locked down into all these earmarked accounts. So I know we didn't take that action. You're not gonna be able to find that motion because it doesn't exist. But what we had worked out over many budget sessions basically, and what they came back with a couple different varieties, and I think I can dig up all those copies. I'd be able to show you what they presented, and it wasn't what you were looking for until they kind of came up with this and put some years behind it as an acceptable alternative to what we were looking for. But again, it's not when we did this, it was for a planning tool. It's to say, you know, well, how much have we been putting away? And when they did it, this wasn't to say that we put in exactly X amount of dollars into that account. We had them arbitrarily go in and carve it up so that the board could get a feel for what kind of money was set aside for each one of those improvements, future improvements. So when you think of that, it's like, hey, we know we're gonna have to replace this at some time. But again, it's only a guideline. It's not, we say that something's gonna have to be done in 7 years. It might be done in 4 years. It might be done in 10 years. Kirk's just doing it for a budgeting tool to say, hey, I need to put aside money for that for the next 7 years. So unfortunately, what you're looking for doesn't exist. But I'd be happy to show that. And if you did, I mean, I'm not sure where you're going with it or how it impacts this year's budget. The thing I was asking about that Lois had sent out, but if you look at governmental accounting, auditing, and financial reporting, and it's just from a designation standpoint of funds, designations are used to reflect a government's intended use of current available financial resources. The focus on current financial resources is unique to governmental funds. Accordingly, designations or earmarks should be reported only on the governmental fund balance sheet. There is no equivalent equity designation that may be used for government-wide financial reporting or for proprietary funds to reflect the intended use of resources. When we put it into that account, we're only going to use it for what we say we're going to use it for, but it's not earmarked down to each individual project, and shouldn't be.
Well, I remember my thought process was not what you just said. There's no way I want to micromanage his department, obviously. I don't have the expertise to know what he needs. what I was looking for, and I can't speak for the rest of the board either, but we had somewhere around $763,000 that was just sitting in, like Trustee Pompo said, a fund. And obviously it would be used for whatever Superintendent Page felt was necessary. And I thought we said, and I realized they worked really hard on trying to itemize this to break that $700,000 down. But we were looking for some kind of direction on, because at the time we were talking about holding rates. And we didn't want people to think that money was just sitting there and here we are raising rates. And that's when Kirk got up and explained and started putting his spreadsheets together saying, no, I've been setting money aside for these individual projects. And that's how the spreadsheets kind of evolved. This is the way I remember it. So in that discussion, and the only time I really worry about looking at these is when it comes to budget time, and we're looking for whether or not we are going to reduce rates or leave them or whatever we're going to do with them. I was under the assumption that we kind of did, I don't know if earmarked is a good word or not, $51,000 for tools and equipment. And it would be a guideline for us, not that I would manage this or this board would, to say, what are we going to do? You know, maybe we're not going to do the garage this year. I just use that as an example because it makes more sense to the public rather than interceptor rehab. We've got $43,500 that's earmarked for the garage. Well, when we go into building the new building, are we going to use that money? This becomes a topic of discussion for budget. And if Kirk comes up and says, no, we're not going to need that, we're going to structure it differently, it's not earmarked. On the flip side of that, when we sit down and figure that he's got repair and improvements spreadsheets, and he wants to do a project in the next 5 years, we know we've got $450,000 set aside for grinder stations. And we're setting aside in his budget, I can't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, $161,000 for repairs and improvements. That's what we're budgeting. We're taking money out of this department and we're putting $161,000 somewhere. In my mind, maybe it's just the accountant in me, it shouldn't be arbitrary. If we're going to say that he needs $161,000 for repairs and improvements to cover a segment of a 5-year project on grinder pumps, that's where I'm thinking it's going. And we wouldn't arbitrarily take $10,000 out because we needed money for something else. And that's all that I was trying to, that's the way I understood it. And again, maybe that's just from a bookkeeping standpoint and not public sector accounting. You know, I struggle with that all the time because my books are different than the townships. Stands to reason. But that's the way I understood it. Not that we would tell him on any monthly basis what to do, what not to do. It's that this money is set aside. We have budget money that we're told he wants to add to this. And we would have the discretion to say, let's raise rates, let's not raise rates, let's not do this project, let's do this project. That's the only place I was going with that. And I was just looking for some kind of confirmation in the minutes that corroborated what I was thinking.
So, okay, I think that we have to move off this concept that there's a pot of money that isn't allocated for something. It is allocated. They've shared it every budget time. He's got it broken down exactly what he's asking to put aside per year. Water fund improvements, $210,125 per year, broken down by all those things. Now, each one of those isn't a separate line item account. ATS would generate it, motor control center, PLC upgrade or update. It's $210,125 he needs to set aside. Again, that's driven from our ordinance, which says you need to fund the future. For us to determine that we're not going to do that, we need to either make a motion or start working towards changing our ordinance and make a statement that we're not gonna fund the future, or we're not gonna fund some of the future, or one of those items. Because what we need to be doing as a board when we review the budget is, did Kirk follow the ordinance? Is he doing what we've agreed is important to us? So your argument then would not be whether this money is set aside in those funds. If it's just about rates, if it's about lowering or raising rates, then it's about, you know, the public works facility. Did we plan on a public works facility? Mason's Bluff wells, should we be setting aside money for Mason's Bluff wells? We have to expand our system. We know that we're working towards it in the future so that we don't get behind. So then the question becomes, what are we, you know, we're supposed to be stewards of the future. We've done a really good job of that as a township. We go through this same thing every year. We have the same conversation, and I think the biggest disconnect is, well, we can choose not to fund something here, and then we'll keep the rates low. Ishpeming did that for many years. You saw the headlines in the paper last week, $12.75 increase to the lowest water users of 2,000 gallons immediately on their bill. Their auditors came back and said they were $500,000 in the red on their water system because they chose not to fund things. And I think we should be congratulating prior boards as well as this board has continued to fund those items that Kirk's presented as saying, this is what I deem necessary. Our argument should be not to lower rates. It should be about, is he funding monies towards the things that we all agree on are important? So when Kirk comes in and gives us this budget and shares this improvements and replacements with us, what he's really saying is, I have to put aside money, and these are the things that I believe are important. So the board's discussion should be either we agree or disagree with the items he has on his list. Dan?
I think where this all started was, and I don't know about anybody else, but I get asked questions when they see a total reserve balance of $4 million. And they say, what's that for? And I think where we were coming from is we need to show the people what that $4 million is for. And that's why we moved into this earmarked funds to say, you know what, $3,720,000 is for debt. So we put away, this, for instance, in a water fund, $106,000 is sitting there for the Cox tank. So every year we would see this, when Kurt asked for, every year he sets up a certain amount of money that has to go to these funds. So every year we should see this fund rise. I think where Lynn's question was coming from, and I assume the same thing that Lynn did, that when you do your budget, you budget for any repairs that have to be done. You budget for what you need to earmark for, and that's why it's called RE earmarked under the 395 100s or whatever you want to go in there. So we can see this on here, and people can see this on here when they look at the budget. So we don't have to, because if the normal person looks at our thing and just sees a reserve balance of $4 million, they're going to say, why do you want to raise my rates when you've got $4 million sitting out there? This was a way for us to show them. We kept seeing these go in here. What we didn't realize is that all these stuff that's happening during the year that isn't budgeted has been taken out of these funds. And that's why we always assumed that we understand emergencies happen, but they should be budgeted into the budget someplace for emergencies, contingency fund, whatever you want to do. These funds were stuff that, as you say, are stewards for the future. That's what these are for. If we keep taking money out of these, we're really not being stewards of the future because we're taking away from this fund. So I think where Lynn was going and where we all thought we were going was, well, you know what? If we're looking at being stewards of the future, if we're looking for Brookton water main increase, or we're looking for Vandenboom's water sewer, we can say, you know what, if that's a steward, we don't do that. Take the money out of vehicles for the public funds. It was just a thing because I think before I got on the board, and I don't know about anybody else, but this is when I looked at this fund and all I saw in the reserve balance was $4 million, it's very confusing because it thinks that, wow, we got a great pot of cash here. We got $4 million to play with. But we really don't because it's set aside for this, and that's what people don't understand. I think that's why we try to do it this way so people can see what that money's for. But on the other hand, again, like I say, if we're going to be stewards for the future and we keep taking money from these funds, are we really doing what's good for the future? Or are we really picking which we think should be more important than something else?
Let me just correct one thing. We're not taking money from these funds. We're not doing things that we didn't plan on doing. What we're doing is we're shifting. It's, you know, like you said, at the end of 2012, you look at December 31st of 2012, retained earnings for the water fund. If you look at improvements and replacements, what should have been in there was $2,044,574. The reality of it is we had $1,009,148. We're $1 million short in that fund. We're not taking money from that fund necessarily, but money did come out, and I mean, this board did not put the money in for the Public Works facility 2 years in a row. That was $56,000 from both water and wastewater, so $225,000. It was $460,000 in the well project that was stopped after the funding was stopped for the phase 2 of our well project. That would have been reimbursed by the DEQ had it gone forward. That Kirk spent the money in good faith that the project was moving forward, and when the board made a decision not to keep moving forward with funding, he didn't get that money back. So we did take, I mean, right there is $750,000 nearly out of those funds. That the board made those decisions. The 2 years that we didn't fund the facilities, we did it to hold rates down. So we took money out of funding the future to arbitrarily hold rates down for 2 years. When you look at what happens with this, we're not necessarily taking the money out of there when we do budget adjustments, but when something came up, like we had an opportunity to settle a lawsuit, it was in our best interest to move forward. We took the funds out of retained earnings and we settled the lawsuit. It may be that one of these things, it's a Brookton water main comes up and we can do it now. Well, we don't have the $170,000 set in there, but if we can take advantage of it now, we do it, which means we take money out of that retained earnings and we made that improvement. Did we set ourselves back? Well, that's why you don't keep it in every single fund as a retained earnings in a separate fund. It has to be fluid. Just know that based on our planning, we're putting aside $210,000 per year for improvements, $157,000 per year for replacement of assets. And the thing that we say, you get questions and people want to know where it is, that's what this sheet does for them. You can share, you can run copies off and hand this out when somebody asks you that question and say, let me help you understand it better. Here's all the items that we're setting aside money for. You know, we should have $2 million in there. We only had $1,009,000. That's why we need to continue to keep putting this money aside. Help them understand what that money's for when they hear that. You know, you can do the same thing with wastewater. Well, we should have had, you know, $2,112,000, and I don't have it written down what the actual fund balance was, but I'm sure it's considerably short of that again. This is the best way to share that information with somebody who asks you those questions.
But again, when we had our last meeting, we were discussing these funds, and I might be wrong, but if I remember right, I can't find exactly which one we were talking about, but I remember asking, one of these was set up for 4 years, and the 4 years was up next year, and I said, so we have enough to pay for it? And the question was no, because we had to take money out of it for something else. So we are basically taking money out of it for something else. So And I believe it was a generator, to tell you the truth. I'm trying to think, but I think it was the ATS generator that we said, well, gee, there's only one more year left, we'll have enough to pay for that generator. I mean, they said no, because we've been taking money out of that fund for something else. And so that's why what I'm saying is it's nice to have this so people understand what this money's for. But on the other hand, when you look at it purely from just saying in 4 years we should have X amount of money for this, but we really don't because we've been taking it out.
Well, part of it is you're $1 million in the hole as of the close of business in 2012. So how can you say, good, we don't have to put aside this money anymore? We're still $1 million in the hole from where we should have been because of expenditures that boards have taken actions to short the funds that Kirk's been trying to plan for the future with. That's why I say our argument as a board then is not about that. It's about not funding, or is he funding the right things? You know, we should be saying, well, we're not going to fund the future. We're not going to do the County Road 492 tank site. We're not doing Mason's Bluff. We're not doing a public works facility. Those are our arguments that just take those out then. But it's not locking down that money to try to make those decisions. It's not, you can't say, well, look, now he's sneaking extra money in there because he's going to continue setting aside money for that generator when we're $1 million in the hole as of the close of business on 2012. If we're $1 million behind where we should be, it's not like he's sugarcoating it and stashing an additional $25,000 there this year. We haven't done the generator project yet. We know we got to do it at some point. If he does it this year and he takes it out, he takes it out. And then are we done, or will he have $25,000 less per year for his improvements? Sure. I mean, if he's done the project, it's no longer there. But we haven't done that project yet.
But Dennis, it isn't always just about holding the rates either. If we were operating under the assumption that I had, that would give us more credibility to raise the rates and justify what he wants to do, because we have a spreadsheet that says we need 210,000 and this is how we're funding these projects. And then this is what we give to the people who are, you know, not worrying about the 4 million. We need $367,000 a year out of the budget for these items. Some of them can get done now, some next year, some in 5 years, but we're funding it. So then what I'm saying is it would be this board's determination to say, yes, we can settle a lawsuit, but we need $50,000 to do it. Are we going to touch this? I would say no. I would say let's find somewhere else to get it from. In this case, it would be a water account. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a general fund lawsuit. But this would be my what do I want? Concrete. My way of saying, yeah, we do need to raise rates because we need $357,000 next year to continue to fund the projects that we're doing. It's not always about taking away. It's about justifying what you're doing, and that's what I'm trying to say. If we have a budget set up that we're responsible for, and I'm under the assumption that this money is not being touched, that's my responsibility as one of 7. And to come to the realization that I was wrong, I didn't understand this correctly, just makes me think that we aren't funding for the future.
So here's my...
We either need to use this or not.
We're back to square one. You can use it. This is what it's for. He's telling you, this is what I'm putting aside for the future. These are the projects we're going to do, because based on the direction that the board has decided that we're going to be proactive, we're going to fund future developments. We developed an ordinance that guides us and says, when you develop your budget for enterprise funds, these are the steps you're going to follow. You're going to, operations and maintenance, of course, you have to take care of. Debt service, you have to take care of. Then, improvements and replacements, and you're going to put the money in in that manner. You know, you have to be able to operate the system. Part of being able to finance your system is you have to prove that you can pay it back and that you can maintain it and be prepared to use it in the future. That's how you can get bonding to move forward, to put infrastructure in the ground. And, you know, all of those things that we put up in the ordinance said this is what we're gonna do. He's not operating on his own here. He's operating on board direction. Board direction says, here's the ordinance that we believe in, here's what we want you to do, fund the future, we're gonna expand our infrastructure to meet our needs moving into the future. If we hadn't done those things, I mean, when you look at the vast majority of the money that we're recapturing, the people who are on this system in this commercial district are because the board made those decisions. Prior boards said we're gonna expand infrastructure. That's what's allowed us to have the buildup that we have, which then helps all of us in the long run. Not only do we get to expand our system, but it's a tremendous amount of tax revenue that I guarantee you a bunch of municipalities would love to have. Even with the tax tribunal issues going on, it affords us to have the money to do recreational things, to do some of the stuff that we do in this community. This is just a part of it. That money is earmarked. It's enterprise funds. It can only be used for enterprise funds and nothing else. We're not spending any of this money anywhere else. When somebody asks you, you say, here's what we're funding. We're gonna have to expand our water system at some point. The County Road 492 tank site, the Mason's Bluff wells, we're gonna have to expand those. Kirk's setting aside money every year so that when the time comes for us to move forward, we're prepared to do so. Everything that you're asking about, you can explain with these sheets right here and say, absolutely, this is what we put money aside for. When you're trying to say, we wouldn't settle a lawsuit because we've got all this money locked down in an account that we can't touch, or we're gonna decide, well, we're not gonna fund Mason's Bluff wells. We're going against our ordinance. I think you're going against, if you put it into those and lock down those funds into your earmarked funds, you're going against governmental accounting standards and principles. I'm not sure that this board wants to go in that direction. I think we have a dollar amount where we know we're underfunded. Right now, we know, just in the water fund, we're underfunded by $1 million. We know that. Here's the facts. We're underfunded by $1 million. Nobody can make the argument that we shouldn't be putting aside money for the public works facility. I mean, we shorted it $250,000. This board shorted it $250,000 that we would love to have right now. And when we did that, it was to hold rates down. We made that decision, so we're not gonna fund it because we wanted to hold rates down. I said it at the time and I'll say it again. It was irresponsible and a huge mistake to do so. And why look at this every year, this conversation always starts, make no mistake, about rates. It's about rates. It's about how can we lower rates. And we can't lower rates unless we want to change our ordinance, change our direction, tell Kirk as a board, we're not going to complete our well project. We're not going to do certain things. We're not going to expand our sewer. If we want to do that as a board, make the motion and let's change our direction. I'll vote no, I can assure you. But that's, you know, it's a democratic process. You have that opportunity. But we always come back to this because it's about rates. Rates are a function of sales. We sell less, we charge more. All of this stuff has nothing to do with rates. This has to do with the direction that the board has provided for our superintendent of public works. One day we're gonna complete sewer, one day we're gonna complete our well project. Change the direction to Superintendent Page, change your ordinance, but this has nothing to do with holding down rates. Pete?
I looked at this, I don't think I wouldn't think that we'd want to lock in every account. And I look at it like, you know, if something happens, he puts the money away, something happens, he needs the money somewhere. It's like my household, I put money away for a car, or repairs, stuff like that. If something happens, you have to get the money out of that account and use it again and continue on. A major repair, $10,000. A bigger repair, you might have to dig up the road and for $30,000. You you know, if we can't have an access to some of that money, yeah, we'll take it out, but we're gonna get back on track again, so he needs that flexibility. I don't think anyone that operates, I don't think most business does not operate, you lock it in. You have to have flexibility in that.
I guess I'm not explaining myself well enough, because I'm not talking about locking it in. I don't know, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, how are we gonna move off it? I'm looking for a solution. I'm dying to know what your solution is. I mean, to me, I look at the budget, it does what we've asked him to do, it follows our ordinances. His rates are a reflection of the sales from the prior period. You move forward. You either accept the budget or you don't. You vote yes or you vote no. If you're trying to change the direction of what he's putting aside money for, which appears to be what we're hung up on, then change the ordinance or make a motion to stop funding the future or a portion of the future, or tell him he's got the wrong vision, and so that we can move forward and we don't have to do this every year. Dan?
I think, and you're right from the standpoint that every year for the last 4 years that I've been on the board, rates is the problem, because that's the one thing people see. And I don't, you know, it's a complaint issue because we've raised rates every year for 4 years. And to say that, you know, for me, my biggest problem is the fact that we're saying we're selling less water. Okay, so up to September, we're selling less water. We're still at 74.86% of the budget, which in 3/4 of the way through the year is pretty darn close to right on budget. If we've lost all the sales, and that's just the water, the wastewater, I believe, is 74.73. So if we've lost all these sales up to September, which we keep seeing, and that the water rates are going down, the sales are going down, the sales are going down, the sales are going down, why to tell me that we have to raise rates when I'm looking at the fact that we're right on budget for sales of rate? 74.86%. We've done 9 months, we're at 75% of the budget.
So when you look at it, Dan, what's your solution? Where are you gonna, what would be your argument with Kirk, that his revenue projections are incorrect, that we need to lower his revenue projections? I mean, I'm asking, I mean, like, you said you look through it and you look at where we're at. So my question then is,
Well,
if we don't raise the rates, then we're gonna lower his revenue projection on sales, yes?
But my problem is the fact that he's saying that we, you know, and I could be completely off base on this, but the fact that we're selling less water, our budget should reflect that under sales, and it's not. Under sales, it's showing that we're right on budget. So to say, well, we have to raise rates because to tell me that we have to raise rates because we lost money on sales, I can understand. But according to the budget right now, we haven't lost money on sales. According to the budget, we are right on schedule from where we are.
So,
And I know we've got 3 months left, and I know it's probably you know, we're getting into the winter months, but then again, water wasn't used that much this summer anyway on lawns. So, you know, for the excuse of raising rates because we're not using the same amount of water doesn't fly with me, just simply because we're on track on our budget.
so if you look at gallons sold that we get just on water, and you start to look at where we at when we're in our summer months and we're pumping 11,500,000 gallons, 11 million gallons as we get to the end of the year, and that drops down to 8.2, 7.1, those gallons drop off, right? So as we move forward and the budget's kind of static on where we're gonna be, you also have to think of, have our expenditures changed any? Have we had any increases in expenditures to see if we need to recoup more revenue? As far as what we've put aside for the future, have those numbers changed from year to year? What we're setting aside? When he asked us to set aside $210,000 for improvements, $157,000 for replacement costs in water, those numbers have been static. Those haven't changed, right? So we're setting that amount aside, but where our expenditures have changed, that would change our revenue projections, is more in hospitalization costs or contracted services, or did we add somebody into salary to maintain our system? Our system grows every year. And so if I just want us to be able to move off this. We keep going back to this. That money's been static. He's telling us this is what we need to set aside for the year. If we agree that that is right, then we don't need to talk about that anymore. If you want to talk about revenue versus expenditures from a fee standpoint, this has nothing to do with those fees.
I think, I look at it from the standpoint that, and Kurt made the comment that his projection for 2014, he's working off of the 2012 sales of water and sewer. If you're working off of that, if you feel that that's going to be, to me, I think if you're going to do that, you should be working off of this year's one, since that's the one that's going to be the most current, because if we did go down, you're going to have to readjust your budget. If you know, like every other budget, exactly how much money you got coming in, you start with that point, and then you figure out your budget. You don't figure out what you want and then figure how you're going to get it by taking other stuff away from it. And it's all because of the rates. And that's, everybody comes back to us. And again, I'm going to say it, I get phone calls about rates. Probably the only thing I get a phone call is about water rates, water and sewer rates. Because every year we've gone up. And every year we try to explain to people, but then I look at this and I'm saying, to use the argument that we have to raise the rates because we're selling less water doesn't fly when I look right at the fact and say we're right on schedule with our sales.
It's not Marquette Township, it's every place across the country. You can read every article, read issuings. Why were they so under? What do they say? The first thing they say is they sell less water. People use less. They utilize less. Why? Because they upgraded their fixtures. This isn't unique to Marquette Township. This is everywhere across the country. I challenge you to find a system that tells me that that isn't true. Every single person that talks about the rate increases talks about the challenges.
Then don't use the argument that we have to raise rates because we're selling less water. Because that doesn't fly. Right in the face of this, that doesn't fly. Because if we're on track for sales in our budget, even though we've not sold that much water this year, you can't use that as an argument.
So
if you want to raise rates because you are underfunding another budget and you feel that's the way a budget item, that's the way you want to do it, then say that's the way you're going to do it. Don't say that you want to raise rates because we have sold less water.
Rates are absolutely a function of sales.
But then if that's the case, why do you want to raise rates? If the
Okay,
sales are on 75% of the budget in September is showing we are at 74.86. If the fact that we sold less water would have reflected, we should be down in 50% of the budget.
So you show me, Dan, show me your solution on, you take that off the revenue and then you show me your solution so we can move forward. I'm begging you, make a motion. Tell us how to do this. Show us what your solution is. Feel free to keep the rates where they're at or lower them $1 and then explain to me how you're going to balance the budget and fund everything that's in here. That's what I'm asking to do. Let's move off this. But I've never heard a solution yet other than we can't raise rates or let's take something out of the future funding and impact that somehow.
Well, maybe what it takes down to is Kurt should go back and look at his budget and decide maybe I can't spend $125,000. Maybe I can only spend $75,000 a month or a year on the building. Or I can only put in $50,000 instead of $60,000 for the generator. It's just a matter, I mean, it shouldn't be up to us to decide how Kurt runs his budget. All I'm saying is, the rate thing is a problem. And if you want to raise the rates, you haven't explained to me why you want to raise the rates. You said the biggest factor in his narrative was we had to raise the rates because we have sold less water. It doesn't fly.
It absolutely flies, number one. Number two, you're $1 million in the hole on retained earnings just in the water fund.
Only on stuff that we took away.
You're gonna tell me that we're so flush that we should lower rates because we're so flush, even though
I never said lower rates. What I said, I never said lower rates. All I said was, you want to tell me that you want to raise rates because we sold less water. And it doesn't fold under the budget system because we are at the correct amount for our percentage of the budget for this year. And we've not sold all that much more water. We've lost a lot of water sales this year, but we're still on budget.
And he based it on his 2012 because that's when he has a full year. We don't have the full year of 2013 yet, do we?
It's still on budget.
So he's gonna make a projection from his 2013 through June's water report when we put the budget together? No, so he uses the prior year.
Well,
We can't base it on 2013 because we don't have that full year. If we come in short and we base 2014's budget on what we're gonna sell in the next 3 months, you tell me how that works. You're making it based on those projections, and if that's your solution, offer that up and let's move forward. And let's say we're not gonna raise rates.
I told you before, I have no problem with Kurt's budget other than the fact of the rates. Now, if he can redo his budget so we don't show that a $2 increase in wastewater, we're right on the money in wastewater also. I'm sorry, it's just,
But you say we go up every year in wastewater, we lowered wastewater.
which was
We were
probably the
at
biggest mistake we
$12.
ever made by lowering the wastewater.
We don't go up every year, we lowered it. Now
But we
we're
didn't,
just
but
back
we
up to where
wanted to
were 2
lower
years.
water last year and we said, no, we're holding it fast. And now we're still raising. Because we said, and from the city did not, the water rates from the city did not come up as high as that was supposed to be.
So
But we
what's
still
your-
have to raise more water rates.
So what's your solution?
My solution is go back and redo the budget.
But what? I mean, what are you gonna tell him to do? A portion, are you asking him to violate a portion of the ordinance? Are you telling him that he has the direction wrong from the board? What are we gonna tell him? We can't tell him just go back and change the budget or don't raise rates. Just leave last year.
You know what, if I had a budget and I realized I didn't have as much money as I had, I guess I would have to cut back on some things that I wanted to have. Instead of, like I said, instead of putting $125,000 away into the building, I put a little bit less. His whole building is gonna be under a loan, which is gonna be a loan payment. That's a brand new building. So to tell me that, you know, I'm sorry, it just, in all good conscience, I cannot agree to a rate increase. And I'm only one vote, but that's my vote, because it just, in all good conscience, I cannot agree to a rate increase.
So you don't have a solution other than he just needs to cut his revenue projections and he needs to not fund the future.
I'm not saying not fund the future, just not fund it as much.
So we want
You took money out of it to start with whenever we needed money for the legal issues or whatever. You took it away, you didn't fund it on that one, you took it away. So, you know, you had to come from someplace.
Or
So
we
maybe
could
it's
have-
just less funding.
Or, as I said, the board took away $250,000 towards the building, you just suggested we take away more money towards the building.
That's my,
That's
I don't have that's my answer. That's the only
Okay.
answer I have.
So Dan's suggestion is, how does the board's consensus feel about it? We don't fund the building that we're building right now, or that we fund it to a much lesser extent, we spread out the payments, we pay more interest, will it really save us money? I don't believe it will, but if that's the suggestion so that we can artificially hold rates down, even though we know that we're in the hole, we want to repeat Ishpeming's mistakes, then I want to hear the board's consensus on it. Dan's offered up his solution. How do we feel? Pete?
No.
Clerk Matari, you in?
I'd have to look at some more figures, but I don't think that would be the best thing to do.
Ernie?
Part of what Dan says is true. And if you want to go back to what I said a year ago, when we were setting rates, it goes back to the city when we did that, they did that analysis. We allocated X number of dollars to pay for that, and it wasn't used. And if you go back and look, it was 23 cents more that we did not have to put towards rate, and we put it there, plus we raised it at the same time. And we talked about doing something in July, re-looking at everything. I brought it up, and nothing happened in that. If you go back and look at the revenue generated, sure, we didn't pump as much water, but our rates were above what we needed, so we generated enough funds to do it. So I've looked at this, and looked at it, and looked at it, and I put it aside, went back and looked at it again. In September, you had revenue was 77,000 something. And I said, okay, that's through September. You got October, November, and December. What kind of decrease in water usage are you going to have in those 3 months? They weren't watering grasses in September. So what's going to decrease in the 3 months out there? Possibly the hotels and motels. The restaurants aren't going to decrease. The apartments aren't going to decrease. The residents aren't going to decrease. So your usage is still going to be there. There's no question about that. So using that and extrapolate that 77,000 out 3 months, all of a sudden, rather than what he says, you're going to be over 899,000 versus a budget of 692,000. So you're over that. I'm just playing with figures now, looking at it from a standpoint of this is what's going to happen. Sure, something drastic could happen, but I think the rate, I can't justify the rate on water, and I can't justify the rate on sewer. And another thing is when he was talking about sewer, there's a decrease in our flow costs are increasing, but our usage on flow costs are down, he said, because we're not pushing enough through that plant over there. So that cost is down. So that's got to be figured in at the same time. So I'm just looking at rates come back to revenue generated. If you're generating the revenue, sure, you're going to have some rate in to take cost of increase of wherever you are. But how much, I don't know. I can't justify those 2 increases without coming back and telling me where that money's going to go. Sure, you can look through here. I can put together a budget. I had to put together budgets where I was at. And it came back at times, you're not getting that. Redo it. And put it back together and send it up there. You're close now. Come back again. And they were for a few $1 million on these budgets and that I had to play with in that. So, and I really had no income other than what came from the state and that. So it's difficult to sit here and go through all this because we're not privy to a lot of this on a day-to-day basis in that. Going back to these water improvement, when we talked about this a couple, 3 years ago, we were concerned that we couldn't know, we did not know how much money was really set aside to do these projects. And that was a major discussion at that point in time. And that's why some of these spreadsheets all of a sudden came out, because we had to have some idea what we're facing in the future in that. Because it was approximately 3 years ago that this came out. So all of a sudden we're at the 4-year point. So if the generator's failing, we've got a $100,000 project we're setting right there. Our motor control, $85,000. These things are setting there at a 4-year point. Where's this money coming from? There isn't enough money there. So are we saying we're going to have to raise the rates to cover this or not? I don't know. And as the individual at the podium said, planning for the future, that's something else too. And that comes out to these other things. How do we set money aside to plan for all this? Some of that's going to be by developers, because that's the way it should be done. But then we have the maintenance after that to keep it going. The solution? I don't have a solution. I'm trying to figure out myself which way to go, but I'm looking at revenue coming in. This year is going to be almost to the dollar, if not more. So you're going to have to raise revenue to meet some additional expense that you know is going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with hospitalization. Wages are going to go up. Electricity is going up. All this is going to go up, so that's all got to be figured in. But do we need that bigger rate increase to cover all this when we know what our sales are? I had my 2 cents.
Diana, Deanna offered a solution. What's your
I don't
idea?
really have a solution, but I don't know, I was kind of looking into it as like a business way. If you aren't making enough in your business, what do? You do cutbacks, you know, things like that. So I don't know, I'm just thinking if there's some way we could cut back in the department, but I don't know where to cut back or anything, but, you know, that's like if you sell a lot of bread, then the following month you don't sell that much bread. Well, to make up the difference, you know, you either cut back or, you know, you don't put so much bread out.
Or you raise the price.
Well, see, I don't,
You gotta cover your fixed costs.
well, I mean, I can see all the improvements and all the stuff that we have to fund. That you know, I understand all that. But I'm just saying, you know, if there's, I don't have a solution for it, but I'm just thinking as a business point of view is, you know, if you ain't making what you're supposed to be making, you gotta cut back on something. I don't think then having the rates go up just because we losing water either, so I don't know, I don't really agree with that either. So. But I don't really have a solution. I wish I did.
Dennis, when I first got into this budget 4 or 5 years ago when we started this, my main objection to the way it was done was that the rates are the last thing that Kirk sets. He puts his budget together based on projections, of course, of revenue and expenses. But it's partly what Diana said. This is his wish list. He says, this is what I'd like to do. This is what I need to have. I need to have another full-time person. I might need to put some money toward a vehicle. I've got to pay the building. I have to, you know, fund the spreadsheet, which is fine. But there comes a point where you have to live within your means. And if you can't, like was said, put $50,000 toward the building or buy another vehicle or get another full-time person, you can't do it. You do sometimes have to raise your rates. I don't have a problem with that. It's the way it's done. This budget should probably be figured. We've tried to get it done earlier, June, July. And Manager Gerard doesn't feel comfortable with like a 6-month budget to go on. Can you safely say we've spent $500,000 in 6 months, so we need $1 million for next year? That may not be a good analogy. You may not be able to do that. In my business, what we look at is, if I were doing this budget, I would take October, November, December of last year and the first 9 months of this year. And I would use that as a rolling projection. I would probably do it on a 3-year cycle and get an average going back. You know you're going to have, you know what your fixed costs are, you know what your payroll increases are going to be. You can guesstimate we know that we got an 8.5% increase for lights. That's the way I would set it together. I wouldn't base everything on projections so that the rate ends up being what you have to do your wish list. In my mind, and I've said this before, he does his budget backwards. He does it, he says, this is what I want, and this is what I have to have come in to do this. I can't do that. So from a business standpoint, that doesn't make sense. And this is still a business, whether it's private or public. It's a business. We have income, we have revenues, we have expenses, we have payroll, HR. We have the same things. We're structured a little differently by the legislature, but it's basically a business. So my objection to the rate increases is the way the budget is structured. Do I think that this can be redone? Like, is that the solution? Probably not for this budget. And if I were going to make a suggestion for this, I would probably raise the water rates a little bit and take it off of sewer and balance it a little bit better somehow, so that, I mean, I don't see a lot of justification for where things were raised. And I went through it, and like Treasurer Johnson said, I went through it, I put it down, I got frustrated, I go through it again, I tried to think of a different angle. Why is he raising this and not this? Do we use more, do we have more expense for this account than we do here, so that's why he's justifying? I mean, I don't know, but short of micromanaging what this is done, this is what we're responsible for. This is what we're here for. We have to know how to do this. We have to understand it. We have to know his reasoning. That's our job. It's our fiduciary responsibility to argue about this, basically. Unless we can come to consensus like we do on 95% of everything else we do, this is our clincher, the utility budget. I think we get along pretty well otherwise than this. We just need to figure out a better way to do this. And do we make him, at this point, go back and do another budget? No, I don't think so. But I think we can tweak these enough, a little bit, add $5 here, $2, 50 cents here, take 10 cents from here. I think we can massage this a little bit and get it done. Because it's too late in the year to be messing with this. But next year, I'd like to see the structure change. We need to do like a 3-year or 5-year projection. We need to put in 1% or 1.5% increases steady, so people know how they can budget, so we don't have to do this. We need to structure it differently.
Clerk Terry?
Yeah, me and Dennis talked about the rates, I think it was a week or two ago. And the rate variation was, I think, that's where most of us have the problem with. If it goes up one year, 30 cents, the next year possibly goes down 40 cents. Wastewater goes up $1.70, next year goes down $1.50. I don't think we'd have these discussions, and we'd probably save a lot of time if we could just stabilize the rates somehow and probably go with a percentage increase every year if that was warranted. But then that way, everyone would know what they are, and you might have a small percentage increase every year. It's not going to be a huge increase. It might be 3% or something of that nature. But I think that's where this board's getting off in. And like I said, the last, 3 years, 4 years, you're absolutely right. That's our major discussion point, is the rates. And my solution is I think we should go to where the rates are now, as projected, and moving forward, we make a motion that we're going to stabilize those rates and do a small percentage increase. And if we have to amend our ordinance to do that, we'll do that. So we're not in violation of our ordinance, because that's a no. You really don't want to do that. And I really don't want to be like communities to the west where they're raising their utility bills $8 to $12 a month. That's not fair either. And on the water side, we have pumped a lot less water.
6.5 million gallons through September.
Yeah, well, I work nights a lot of times, and I see the final pumping rates at the end of the, and that's not, the township's saying you're taking a percentage of that, less than 25%. But our pumping rates from August to September, 1 million gallons less. So, I mean, there isn't not the water usage in the colder months, September, October, November, December, because people aren't watering their lawns and such. So, we do see water decrease, and sales are a part of that equation. And I understand Dan's argument. You're looking truly at the budget. It looks like you're on track. But if you look at historic rates, you might not be there at the end of the year, So that's my solution. I think for this year and moving forward, we stabilize the rates at where they're projected to be. And then moving forward, we do a percentage increase every year if warranted. If not warranted, we don't. But it's going to be a small increase every year. It won't be a huge increase. Like last year, we would have stayed at the $12 wastewater. We wouldn't have percent increased it because it would have been going down. But then at the same token, you don't want to be flush in cash either. You know what I mean? You got to look at that part of it too. Because if you keep your rate steady and you do have years that you sell a lot of water and a lot of wastewater, you're gonna have a lot more revenue coming in. And then maybe that's where we can put into that area that we're $1 million short on, you know. So I think maybe that's the best solution for everyone. And moving forward, we won't have these, you know, I would say they're not wasted time, but it's just a long period of time, we just talk circles a lot of times around things. And I just think we could use our time better. It's my solution.
Thanks, Randy, good solution. Pete?
My concern is, last couple of years, we had the same arguments. We probably should have done it, and tonight when we're talking about, well, we should never have done it, never lowered it before, here we are in the same thing. He hasn't changed his budget very much. The rates are the way he does it all the time. And if we don't do it, I think we're gonna come back in a couple of years and say, oh, we should never have done that. Because we just got through saying it tonight. We should never have done that, never lowered it. I don't know. I like Randy's. It's gonna cost us more money to operate no matter what we do. Cost is not going down. Look what's happening to the government. We'll be paying more and more for everything, so. I think his budget's pretty darn close. I think we should approve it and then look at something like what Randy said, small increment every year increase,
If needed.
if needed.
It's the same budget we've looked at every year. It doesn't really change it from year to year. When I say rates are a function of sales, we're through September, we've sold 6,526,551 gallons less than we did in 2012. When you look at revenues, are we close to projection on revenues? Well, Kirk projected 2013 to be lower in revenues because, again, it's based off the 2011 water at that time. This one's based on 2012 water production. In 2011, we had a down year. When we looked at 2012, we actually had a decent summer and pumped a lot more water in the summer, which is why we're down. Now we're back on a down year again, year to date. 6.5 million gallons less in sales. That's revenue. We know we're coming in 6.5 million gallons less than we were in 2012. You know, are we on track for revenue? We won't know that till we finish out the year. But again, revenue is based on water sales, and 2011 expected it to be down. I thought he did a pretty good estimate of what his revenue was going to be on sales. You know, it's tough to consider that you're going to lose almost 7 million gallons in sales in 1 year, because then it is rates are a function of sales. I think that, you know, I offered it up before that we agree to this increase and then put in a 1.5% increase or a 3% increase or whatever the board's comfortable with moving forward. It doesn't sound like we have consensus that this board is going to put those increases back up. When you look at what he's asking for, I mean, right now water is $6.73. In 2006, it was $7.13 per thousand gallons. It's less than it was in 2006. When you look at his increase on wastewater, it's only slightly above where we were 2 years ago. We've been here before. We've lowered them, we've raised them, we've lowered them, we've raised them. And what we need is stability. And I think if we would just move forward, the budget's the same, it doesn't change. It's the same budget we've looked at every time. We go through and try to line out $1,000 here, $1,000 there so that we can lower rates. When the reality is, it's still, again, I'll say it again, rates are a function of sales. We sold almost 7 million gallons less in water. That impacts revenue stream over the year before. And, you know, we don't do this with any other budget. We don't try to pick every other budget apart. Could we find $50,000 in the fire department's budget? I assure you we can. If we want to eliminate $50,000 out of there, we certainly could, but we don't even ask the questions, we don't look at it. Can we do it in the general fund? Yeah, I assure you I can go back into that general fund probably and pick it apart and find 50 grand that we don't have to fund. But we never do that, we never even have that conversation. We only do it to our enterprise funds, and that's what frustrates me. I don't get it. It's what it, I mean, this is the same budget, we look at it. Our argument should be, is he getting it right? If it is, then we don't need to talk about those funds and retained earnings for improvements and replacements. If it's something in expenditures so that we can hold rates down, then that's our argument, and let's keep it at that. We don't have to visit improvements and replacements again. We can pick it apart on expenditures. Kirk, you wanna get up to the podium and weigh in? You've heard some suggestions. Do you wanna go back in and find some expenditure that you're gonna cut out so you can lower the rates from what you had asked for?
Well, I certainly don't want to add to the confusion. Maybe I'll just give you kind of an overview, how I budget. Those replacement improvement funds I don't develop those numbers. It's based on DEQ required long-term plan, if we do. And then after that, and that's, again, I don't even do that. I hire consultants. In fact, we're redoing that right now. Because we are growing, DEQ says, you can't project out 20 years. Because of your growth, you need to project out 5 years. You still gotta do 20 years, but you gotta adjust it every 5 years. Okay, not every 20 years. The city of Marquette, for example, does not have a growth, so they don't necessarily have to update theirs every 5 years. They may or may not. So, as we do that, okay, those numbers come in. What do you need to do to make, supply water to your, and even the future demands come from the township? You look at planning, zoning, okay? How is the township zoning? What does the township anticipate for development, okay? And that changes, which it should. I mean, you have to pay attention to that. You have to make these projections. So that's a starting point. Planning is a starting point. So then we use that through engineering to develop, okay, how are we gonna meet that demand now and in the future? And then we make adjustments every 5 years. Those numbers that come back from engineering consultants, in turn, go back through the planning commission. The planning commission looks at it and says, yes, we wanna do that. Or the planning commission goes back to the township board. Township board says, yes, we wanna do that. Plus, every time, even if we hire independent consultants just to do a rate study, like we do with the city, to do that joint study, which is required by contract, they use the same process. Okay, for example, we've got a 3-year rate set with the city. They go to each community, they look at operation and maintenance expenses, which are, that's pretty much what they're gonna be. They're gonna be incremental increases because everything is rising. Labor, fuel, electricity, everything's going up. Even groceries, which doesn't impact us, but it impacts, as individuals, it impacts everybody. So those are pretty easy to project. Then they ask you, what improvements are you gonna make to your system? Okay, that's not only expanding the system, but that's like major expenditures to improve what you've got already. And that's in addition to, what is it gonna take to replace your system? Okay, so normal consultants do that, and your rates are based on that. Okay, so over this 3-year period, you're gonna need X amount of money for operation, for your debt, and for replacement improvement. When we borrow money from the state, or we get grants from the state, usually it starts at the feds and is funneled through the state. But in either case, both cases, we have to actually sign a contract saying, okay, we are in fact gonna do what you're lending us money to do, and we're gonna keep our rates equal to what we say we're gonna do. And in fact, I'm gonna do it again. Because part of there's another grant that's brand new this year that I'm gonna apply for the free money. And it's basically for wastewater, stormwater, and asset management related to wastewater. So I'm going to exactly the same thing that I'm doing right now. So, again, it's something that everybody, you know, we agree on, I agree on, the state agrees on, independent consultants agree on. So that's basically how it's done. And so you put those, and those are your expenses. And the rate is the last number I plug in. And what do? I just balance the budget, that's all it is, a balancing number. So, and again, it's based on projections or, you know, use. So, that's a concept, which, you know, again, everybody's agreed on that. So, I guess I'm with supervisor, I'm a little bit baffled why everybody's so upset. And I agree with the concept of going up and down, you know. I could totally go with stabilizing rates, you know, with projected moderate increases, if necessary. So, that's my input. And certainly, I mean, I can do whatever you know, tell me. But in terms of whittling away the budget, Randy's already done that. You know, once I finished it, I gave it to him. And again, the parts that he whittled away went back into one of these already established funds, which is our new facility, which is fine. And, you know, I could change that. We can do that. So, and a lot of the discussion's been, you know, how it's done, and a lot of it's been related to accounting, you know, questions, which, you know, Lois has answered those questions, you know. When you ask the question, how come we don't have the money? Okay. Lois answered the question, we do have the money, okay? If I need that $100,000 for whatever's been established as a need and agreed to by everybody, she just moves the money over there. I mean, it's there. So, again, I'm baffled at, you know, what we're arguing about.
Questions for Kurt?
I don't mean to confuse the situation.
No,
Just trying to
it was good.
clarify.
Specific questions for Kurt? Anyone? No? Sure.
Is there a long answer or a short answer maybe to how you decide which funds go up and down? I mean, it's a small jump for water and a pretty sizable jump for wastewater. And a lot of these rest of the accounts aren't touched. Trash went up a little bit, quarter I think it was. Is there a methodology to this? I mean, obviously if we don't have something in here that's used a lot, there's no point in raising the rate because you're not gonna generate enough income to have it make a difference.
You mentioned, you know, using like a 3-year average. That is exactly what I do for the operation and maintenance part, not especially like the repair needs. That's what it's. Okay. Because, you know, 1 year I could spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on water maintenance. Okay. I could spend zero. So I do look at the long-term average. So that number, you know, each year is gonna be up or down. But if it's up, it goes down to that retained earnings. If it goes, you know, if I don't spend enough, that's where it goes. If I spend too much, it comes out of it. So in general, the money's there, and we're not, you know, we're pretty flush. I mean, you know, and I also budget a contingency, and I think it's 5%, which is just, you know, again, that's a made-up number. But within years where the figures work the same, there's no contingency. But the thing is, things happen. You know, they just do. And you can't say, okay, we're not gonna pay the bills. And we've never been in a situation where we can't pay the bills. I mean, if you get in that situation, you know, we got a proposed contract yesterday, and of course, there's new required language for public employees. The emergency manager required. Well, if the governor assigns an emergency manager to Marquette Township, that means you've lost total control, and you can't pay your bills. That's the whole purpose of that. But you're not there. And I don't think you want to be there.
how do we move forward?
I'd like to comment, a couple things you made, that no one said, we don't do anything with the fire department, their general fund, or anything else, picking apart anything else, till we get to the water fund. The problem with the water fund and the sewer fund is this little statement that is sent out every month to every resident in the township. It's a little bit different, because they don't see anything on the fire department, they don't see anything on the general fund or anything else. And they get this statement as to use of water and sewer, they now become active players, what's going on. And if you don't think that is not an active player, then you're not much in the township. Because they're out there, and I don't care where you're at, they'll comment. And they'll continue to comment on that. And no matter what we do, and no matter what we say, a great percentage of them are not gonna like it at all. And on the sewer usage, comment that you wrote that our usage from the plant was down because we're not pumping that much sewage in there at this point in time. Our usage is down. So taking that into consideration, how did you come up with the rate then? Should it have been higher if we were pumping more? Seeing we're pumping less, so we're paying them less. We still have the debt there. There's no question about that. So we have to pay the debt off. There's no question that. And part of that goes by the amount of sewage we pump. And that. So we have to cover that regardless.
Well, actually, it's the same process. The budget that I propose here is the same budget adopted by the wastewater advisory board, which of course we are represented in that board because we're part owners. And our ownership is 10%. And that's, so we pay 10% of the fixed demand cost, which is primarily debt, but other charges that are related to, not flow related charges.
But we also.
And in fact, because of the lower use, the unit rate that we pay goes up. And actually, they have another advantage. What we're paying is a budget just like we do. They make projections. So the rate that we pay is based on the projected use. But at the end of their budget year, and this year they changed actually, so we'll be going into, in fact, I believe we are in now, like when there's a 3-month.
It's a 15-month
That's a
budget.
15-month
Yeah, 15-month
year,
budget.
basically, so that is an additional complication. Plus, our budget here is totally different than the city, so basically, I go with whatever the board adopts. Because in the end, it's gonna work out the same. But where I was going with this was, the rate is set, that's what we pay. We got a master meter, measuring the flow going out of the township. That's what our billing is based on, our monthly billing, just like we do here for our customers. But then, the difference being at the end of the year, when they get audited, at the end of their budget year, they get audited, if that calculation is off, guess what? We gotta pay. Okay, we gotta pay the difference.
So what you're saying is.
We don't have that luxury. If we're off, we're off.
So we're saying they're budgeting on our projected flow.
Yeah.
And if our
Just
flow
like we do
doesn't
here. Yeah.
equal that, their budget is low, which means now we're gonna have to come up to equal their projection.
Yeah.
Right.
So regardless, we could flow nothing, and we're gonna pay X number of dollars.
And that's not gonna happen, of course, but.
I know that, but that's kind of what it amounts to in
Yeah.
that.
But what I'm doing is, what I'm saying is they budget the same way we do. Concept is the same. But again, that's one line item of the budget. So you're talking about the rate that we pay to the city. Okay, we're pretty much in line with the budget there. And actually, we did, I was looking at that. So looking at the wastewater right now, but the water, that line item for the water, which is the rate that we pay to the city, okay, is one line item. And that has been going up for 3 consecutive years. And for this year, it was reduced. Okay, it was reduced. And the same thing, you know, with the sewer rate that we pay to the Marquette area which is ours. Does that answer any questions that you asked?
It answers the question that you had in here about decrease in flow. And to me, okay, decrease in flow, we should pay less money. But in reality, what you're saying is they're budgeting on X number of dollars and we don't hit it. They're still gonna, we're gonna be penalized because we didn't hit it.
Right, they're basing on projected flow, which, you know, sometimes is a little off. It's getting a little bit better. And maybe this is getting way off the subject, but, you know, the wastewater plant, another reason the flow is going down is, the city has an older system. They have actually a lot of direct storm connections to the sanitary sewer, and they've been, you know, spending a lot of time and money separating that. Even my house had, I got an old house in Marquette. The roof drain was connected directly to the sanitary. And, you know, that's a lot of water going in. So that's one reason for the flow. And in general, everybody's flow is going down just because of the change in pictures that people use. I mean, it's a law actually that you got. They can't be manufactured, so you have to bypass those little flow restrictions, which most people don't do.
So the point being, we have
Use this going
fixed
down
costs
everywhere.
that
Right,
are there.
right.
And if our sales go down, it's less revenue.
Right. And in general, and it's the same here, Marquette, it's the same everywhere. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I think, looking on both sides of the coin there, if our flow is down, they're projecting out X number of dollars that we're going to contribute. And if we don't, they're gonna come back after us for X number of dollars.
Yeah.
But
And it's usually not a huge amount of money, but, you know.
it is a dollar amount. In the
But it's a
past,
dollar.
we've had some big dollar amounts that come through.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the coin is that if our flow is down, then we don't have enough revenue coming in to offset the costs for what we have in the solid waste, or excuse me, from the wastewater. So if we don't have enough dollars coming in, you either raise the rates or you start looking at where we can cut. Now, the question I have is, did we go through and start looking at where we can economize because we're not gonna have the revenue coming in, rather than raise rates?
Yeah, we did, that's what I'm saying, you know, I did that, and I'm pretty sure the fire department, and maybe Dennis did it also with Randy. We did that.
And that's where the decision was made to wherever we could make cuts in the budget, because we're building facilities for all three enterprises, for the hall, the fire department, and public works, that anything that we could cut out of the budget was gonna be taken and put in right towards the principal balance of paying down the financing that we finance the facilities with. So we looked, going through the budgets, trying to find any areas that, you know, I don't necessarily wanna call it slush, but it's money where, can we cut here? And if we can cut, and if we can pull out $50,000 or $60,000, can we take that and at least put half of it towards the principal payment towards facilities, and put the other half into the contingency fund or retained earnings or wherever else you needed to go to help make up any deficits somewhere else? We did it with the fire department, we did it with the general fund, we did it with public works budgets.
But if you remember when we were talking about building these facilities, we talked about no increase of taxes, no bonding, nothing.
And we haven't done that.
In essence, you're doing it through the rates because the rates are there and you're pulling some extra dollars in and you're setting them aside now.
That's not true. That's absolutely 100% not true. None of this rates were done to say, let's pull in some extra dollars and pay for this facility. That is just, don't even put that out there, Ernie, because that's nonsense. That's absolutely 100% not true. You want to go back and say when this board artificially held back $250,000, maybe that's an issue. Maybe that's why the rates are where they were at, because we held them down before by doing something like that. Put it on us, but I mean, to say that we didn't do, that we're trying to do something now and secretly we're gonna secretly raise the money. That's just not true.
Going back to what you said, you're going through and cut and take 50,000 here, 50,000 there. If you didn't have the building to put the dollars to, where would the money go?
Money was still being put aside every year
For the building.
for the building.
That hasn't changed. That same amount is what the projected payment is. The exact same amount that we've been setting aside every year, other than when the board artificially nixed it for 2 years. The exact same payment amount all of these years is the exact same amount that is now what the payment is based on moving forward. We didn't change that amount.
Right, I mean, I have been putting X amount away, based on a previous design, and based on the architect's estimated cost. And actually, last year I did cut that in half because, we were going into a different direction. Okay, and this year I put it back in because I was asked to put it back in, which is fine. So now it's back up to what it was before. And the cutting that Randy did, again, that didn't change the bottom line, okay, because it came out of these other smaller funds and just shifted it to the public fund. So it didn't change the bottom line, And it wasn't that great. In fact, as I recall, I don't recall exactly the number, but I think the water might have been 20,000 or less. And the sewer was hardly anything.
Well, we're bumping up against the end of the meeting. I don't know that we're any closer, Kirk, to moving off your budget.
Well, it sounds to me like you are. I mean, everybody has said, agreed that, okay, you want to do what I've asked you, and you want to fund everybody's agreed that needs to be done. And it sounded to me like everybody agreed to the concept of having this year as a base rate. I mean, everybody says we can't change this year, right? Okay.
I don't believe that's the consensus, no.
Okay.
I believe they want to base it on last year's rates and then move forward.
Well, okay. So, is there any more that I can do then?
Figure out what you're gonna do with
Can I
less
ask him-
revenue.
Can I ask him another question? Kirk, real quick, would it make a difference, I'm just shooting at the moon here. We've got a $1.64 increase in wastewater volume. And I'm thinking that, looking backwards, I'm thinking if you had, instead of putting a $1.64 in there, could you put 20 cents in the monthly debt retirement and 10 cents in the monthly base fee for all of these and make that up?
See,
Is that,
See, I did not change any of the other, the debt retirement is what it is, okay? And we've already established that that's not gonna go up, it's gonna move down. as we
I
had
told,
customers.
that was
And
an
same thing with
example.
connection fees, okay, we did that change, and there's actually a lot of, common sense that says connection fees should continually rise. The theory being, okay, everybody says, because people that's for new customers, new construction. They should pay more than, somebody that built 20, 30 years ago. Okay, because that is a contribution to the system, and it helps pay for basically part of our capital cost, because we are expanding. And it's not, I try to balance that. I can't put all those costs in the user charge, and I can't put that in the flat rate, and I can't put that in the obviously the debt charge. But
Well,
because
that's
we
what I'm
also look
saying.
at stabilizing.
Can't we spread that out a little bit more so that more of the users can absorb it rather than putting it all in one? Right in the-
Well,
right
that's
in
what we've
the-
done, that's what I said, we already,
But nothing else changed in
because it
wastewater.
wasn't just the connection fees, okay, it was a base rate. And that was kind of controversial, because basically we had essentially the same rate for every single customer. So we changed it to just the way we did the debt service, which is an equivalent, okay, based on user size. So, which is more equitable. So everybody's basically paying the same 2 people, you know, is more than 1 person. That's not good. Because it's not, that's not a group of people, that's a group of, you know, type of building and use.
So your answer is no, that we can't, you have to have the $1.64 in the wastewater. You can't spread it out in the rest of the wastewater
Right.
department.
I did look, I did take another look, and I could see going back to, or leaving the water rate the same, but I could not come up with a way to reduce this.
Okay.
Because I have to keep the funds separate, you know, keep it safe.
Yeah, but I
Right.
mean, just within the wastewater department, that's really all you raised, other than the shut-off fee. Nothing else was,
Right, exactly right. Shut off, and that, again, that's cost-based. I think I changed the meter replacement, charge, because the cost of meters have changed, you know, so. With those, yeah, that's.
it has to
that's
be
all
the
that
rate.
changed, right.
Dan, go ahead.
Okay. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I want to clarify a few things. I'm going to try to get this. We talked about the fact that we've never argued over the general fund and the fire fund. I think the reason we never argued over the general fund and the fire fund was the general fund gets their money from taxes. We know how much that's going to be. The fire fund gets their money from 2.5% millage on that. We know that's what's going to, and they know what that's going to be, and they figure their budget on what they're getting. As to what Lynn was saying, the fact that in Kurt's case, it kind of goes a little opposite because he has to figure in this thing to get this thing. So that's why there's never an argument to me with the fire fund, because it always comes up as a balanced budget. I know Kurt tries to do a balanced budget.
It is balanced.
Yeah, I know I know. It's balanced because we raise the increase of the rates to get the balance. That's where the problem comes into play. You did make a comment, and I should caution you when you make comments that we're flush. Not a good comment. If you say we're flush and then we're asking for rate increases,
Well,
that's,
I'm not saying we're flush, I'm saying we're in good shape. You know.
yeah, we're in good shape.
We're in the case where we can't pay the bills,
Right.
and I don't think we want to.
And actually, what Ernie was bringing up, in a roundabout way, I look at it, and I'm not arguing with you about this at all, Dennis, but when we make the statement that, when I made a statement that can we cut funds to get our lower rates down, and you said, well, we cut funds down to get it to the point where we could put money aside to pay off the interest, or quicker to pay off the loan. In a roundabout way, we're basically doing that, but instead of paying out the loan, we could have used that cut down funds to decrease the rates. That being said, I have, as much as I hate to say this, I'm going to throw out a proposal that in 2012, the rates for wastewater were $12. In 2013, we dropped them down to $10.52. If Kurt's saying that we can hold the water rates where they are at $6.73 right now, we wouldn't increase the water rates, I would be agreeable to allow the wastewater rates to go up to what they were in 2012, maybe even give you the 16 cents extra. But that being said, at that point, that's as far as I'm going to go. Next year, I don't want to go through this again. I do not. This is ridiculous. We either set a 3-year standard and say, we're not going to make this stock market bounce up and down rate thing. It has to be, and I agree with Lynn 100%, people have to know what they're going to have to budget. If we're going to say we'll give you a 1% increase next year because we need a 1% increase, that's not the major increase. These are major increases. $1.56 on wastewater is a major increase. If we would have been smart, and hindsight is 2020, but if we would have been smart last year, we would have said, no, do not drop your wastewater down. People know what they're paying. It's nice if we can give them a break, but in all honesty, we should have never gave the break because we could have stayed where we were. We would have been fine right now. We wouldn't be going through this hassle. So that's kind of my proposal. Next, and from this day forward, I want to start seeing a much better way to handle this particular problem. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Dan. Go ahead, Randy.
So Dan, basically my concept, you're agreeable to try to stabilize rates, and if we
Right.
don't have to increase them 1 year.
Exactly.
But any increase, I would think, would be not more than 3% a year.
I don't want,
That's-
I don't want to see any more major $1,
No.
$2.45
I
increases
mean,
anymore.
could Kirk live with that? Could you stabilize the rates and
Yeah,
not
if,
more
you
than
know,
a 3%
for-
increase
yeah.
for like the next 3 years or something like
Until
that?
after the next rate study.
Which is,
And knowing that your budget's gonna have to be decided on that increase only. Not saying, okay, well, gee, I really could use 5%. We have to stabilize this enough that we're not making these major increases, because this is just ridiculous. Out of all the, yeah, it's great, Marquette Township has a really low tax base, I don't have a problem with that, but they have a really high water rate. So, those are, it's a trade-off, but in the long run, like I said, if we can stabilize this so people aren't taking such a huge hit, and I know not everybody's gonna agree to this, and like I said, I didn't agree with it to start with, but we're basically not going anywhere until we solve this problem, and it's obvious to me that, like I said, I don't, if you can live with the fact that we're not gonna increase the water rate, I don't have a problem with that. I know that it's gonna be a tough pill to swallow on the wastewater, but I guess I look at it from the standpoint that last year we were paying that rate anyway. So basically, we took a little bit of a drop down. We're only really going back up to almost what we were paying last year. So, and at that point in time, to me, that is the stabilization mark. From there on, it's no more of this.
well, I think if we did this, if we didn't have took that hit last year and lowered it like you had said, I don't think we'd be having this
No,
argument right now.
I don't
We'd
think.
be done.
Yeah, I don't think we have this argument at all, and it's an unfortunate thing, you look at these last 4 years, and it has been an up and down, it's been a roller coaster ride on rates, and going from what Lynn's saying, well, can we take more on connection fees? We took, if you remember, right, the first 3 years, we put major increases in connection fees. I think we took major increases in a lot of areas. I really don't wanna see us messing with these areas anymore, including rates. I can understand the fact that we have problems in inflation and everything else. We do need to increase rates, but we need to be very vigilant on how we're increasing these rates. And again, I'm not micromanaging, but as Lynn said, this is our job. We are stewards of the township. Trustees basically are set to maintain the money flow to make sure that we're spending our money in the right way. So when we do argue about this a lot, you have to understand where we're coming from. I think it's just, we're the average citizen. We're seeing these rates. We have to pay it just as much as, well, Kirk, you're the Marquette, so you don't pay it, but I have to pay this just as much as the rest of us have to pay it. So I think we're like one person. We're the same as that Joe Sixpack out there, or whatever you want to call it.
Ready?
My final comment of the evening is, with what was being said, I would like to, it's not a motion, because it's not a motion, but I'd like to see if the board is comfortable with that idea, and if they are, I think our budget process is pretty much done, because I think that's basically our hang-up.
We're looking to see if there's a consensus.
I mean, that's just my opinion, because otherwise, we'll have to set some more dates and move on from there, but I think it's a good trade-off, and like Dan said, it's a hit this year, but people going forward know they're gonna only have a small percentage increase if needed. And, it's not gonna be this $1.50 every year. It'll be 20, 30 cents, which isn't gonna hurt anyone if you need it.
Hopefully it'll only be like 5 or 6 cents.
Yeah,
If a 3,000 gallon customer has a 3% increase, it's 60 cents.
60 cents.
So we've got a lot of wiggle room with whatever percentage we want to use.
I think 3% is fine. That's what usually the standards are, is 3%
For 3 years?
for 3 years.
So 1% a year?
No, 3 per year, if needed,
Capped at 3%, no more than 3%.
if needed. And it's gotta be if needed.
But again, it has to be proven to us that it's
Yeah.
needed.
Well, we could say no, you're not.
Yeah, I agree.
So where are we on this budget?
Well, just heard Dan's proposal, he threw out there saying,
Leave water and add,
leave water at 673 and move the wastewater up to 12 or 1216. Cap everything, we do this, and we cap everything at no more than a 3% increase for the 3 years until the next rate study's done, before he could make any major adjustments. And he's looking for, see if there's a board consensus.
well, those are two different funds, so doesn't Kurt have to look at those and see what
No, Kirk-
impact that's gonna have?
Kirk was amenable to it.
You think that's gonna work? Just,
Yeah. Again, we're talking about one line item, and obviously it's a big line item. When you're talking about connection fees, you know, they have been declining as well. And, you know, this year we got lucky because, we may, well, probably not, but, you know, we might meet our projection, which was lower than last year. So, you know, we need those big, like the theater, okay, they did pay a big fee. Mark Curran thought he was gonna pay a big fee, but it wasn't as big as he thought. And he still didn't proceed with this project, so. You know, we've got that one major project, a potential project, you know, behind target there. But, you know, it hasn't happened. So development is slowing some. It's a lot of factors. One is just the overall economy. And secondly, we are getting pretty well developed here. So
Right.
there aren't a lot of places to go.
So is that amenable to everybody, Ernie?
What rate are we talking about on sewer and what rate are we talking about on water?
Dan's proposal was, we basically said
Water stays the same.
water stays.
Water stayed the same, and the
73.
rate go back to 2012, which was $12.
12 even, was it?
Yep.
Can you live with that, Kirk? 16 cents isn't gonna, really kill you.
I would suggest that we still have time. Next meeting would be it, if, because we got the 15th of December, and we have to advertise eight business days prior to that, has to be in the
There's
paper.
timelines, yeah.
So I would suggest if Kurt can go through it and plug in on the figures and make sure it's workable in that, at this point in time. Because I'd like to see it, but I
What
don't
we're
know.
asking
I don't.
Would you agree with it?
I would agree with it if Kurt can make it work. I don't like it, because I've already computed out what the new rates are gonna cost me a month and that too, so, this would be even better, but going forward, it would be great if you can do it. I'm going back to my background in putting together budgets, and all of a sudden, you don't get as much now. Can you live with it or not? That's the next question in that too, so. I'd like to make sure that Kurt can live with this and that.
That's
At the
what I
same
asked
time,
him.
So we're talking about my proposals for 2014, correct?
Yes.
Basically a 16-cent reduction.
Right. And not getting the water increase, which was
24 cents.
whatever that was.
24 cents.
Also a decrease in the water.
Right.
They stay the same.
Not a decrease, is no increase.
Well, it's a decrease from what he needed.
Okay, what he.
All right.
I'd much
But you
rather have-
did say that when you went back and computed it out, you could handle not an increase in water.
I'd like you to go down, crunch the numbers first, make sure you can do it.
Diana,
I
would you
couldn't-
support that?
If he can do it, yeah.
Lynn?
Yes, sir.
Pete?
I prefer to leave the budget alone and plan for the next 3 years. That's what I'm looking at.
Okay. I agree with Pete, I would too. I'd give the increases that he's asking for and move it forward in the next 3 years would be my suggestion, but if we have consensus to move forward, then we have a consensus. We have the majority of the board agrees with Dan's concept. We'll have it back on the agenda for the next meeting to
Finalize it, yeah.
finalize it.
I think we also need to talk about garbage collection, that's going up 25 cents. That's the kind of thing that I've been talking about for years. 25 cents doesn't sound like much. When I'm looking at where the general fund owes the solid waste $100 and some thousand, we're subsidizing that, and then you're forcing them to pay again when they borrowed money that should be paid back so we can keep the rate down.
It'll be discussed at the next board meeting. be able to finalize the budget at that time.
We were doing this, and obviously we had to, one was canceled. So the next board meeting would be,
Second forum discussion.
Second forum
The
discussion on
19th.
November 19th.
as opposed to one. Okay.
Okay, good.
I'd like to get this as soon as possible, but I can wait a few weeks, I guess.
Thank you. If there's nothing else on the Public Works budgets, we'll move on. Additional comments from board members. Clerk, sorry.
Just a short one. I hosted the Marquette County Clerks meeting here. They were very impressed with the new facility. It kind of head-butted against the truck routing meeting, but facility handled 2 big crowds very well. Which, again, down the road, which I think we're going to have to talk about, is parking for big events. We might need some more of that north property down the road for maybe just overflow parking. But other than that, I think they were very impressed with the facility, and it went very well. So Marquette Township hosted a great event for the county clerks.
Thanks, Randy. Anyone else?
I think I would talk about the meeting that was hosted by us for the truck routing. I thought it was very well attended, went very well, and it took a lot of people, got a lot of people involved, I think, that normally would not be. So where it goes from here is the next question. I don't know.
Thanks, Ernie. Lynn?
I was gonna say the same thing, and I'm glad a lot of people showed up. It wasn't as many as I thought it would be, but it was a nice-sized crowd. And I did go to the strategic planning session at the arena, and I'll type something up for you. I thought it was very beneficial.
Cool. Diana?
Nothing.
Peter?
Everyone be careful, deer hunt, good luck to everyone.
Dan?
Remember the white stuff's coming out.
Clerk Charlie, anything else?
I have none.
The only comments I have is there's been some follow-up, actually there's been several follow-up meetings to the meeting that we hosted last week in regards to the city's proposed truck ordinance, and more importantly, the concept of a regional transportation study. I can tell you that while it's very fluid, things are moving rapidly. There's been some very productive meetings hosted by our friends from the city of Marquette. We've had some groups put together, some steering committees put together. This information well again, I say it's very fluid, but as it comes together and the planning comes, certainly there will be some public meetings held to keep everyone fully informed about what's going on. But I think it's a really good start to some regional cooperation. It's a great opportunity for us to tap some private industry for some funds at up to $500,000 that Lundin has agreed to pay to help us with this transportation study. Looks like it will be Marquette County wide, and that will help us in a lot of areas moving forward, whether we're seeking federal funding for something or just as we put our planning departments together with how does this whole thing tie together. They'll be able to look long range at, where's the mining coming from for the next 30 years, 20 years, whatever. Where's forestry going to come from? Where's that traffic expected to impact? Will it be pushing west? Will it be north? What is that going to look like? And that's going to answer a lot of questions. It's going to enable not only Marquette Township, but the city of Marquette, Chocolate, Powell, Negaunee, Ishpeming, Negaunee Township, Humboldt Township, everybody to tie in. The counties down south, Marquette County will be included. And I think that it's just a great opportunity for us to capture some information. It's probably going to be at least a year-long process. Hard to get it done quicker than that, but we're really looking forward to the outcome. And it's been a good process. Lundin has been a great partner. And I think that what you saw here a week ago Tuesday has carried forward. There's a new sense of we're all in this together. We're united on finding some results that work for everybody. So good thing to be a part of. I'm glad that we were able to host it as a township. We really appreciate everybody turning out. There's about 85 people here for that meeting. And if you got any questions about it or where we're heading, contact any board member, myself, or a member of the staff. And that's it.
Move to adjourn.
Motion support to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
said between 5 and 5:30 tomorrow?